Welcome, dear listeners, to a journey into the forgotten corners of New Mexico, a land where sunlit deserts give way to shadowed forests, and where the silence of the pines hides more than just the rustle of leaves. Tonight, I invite you to step into the places that most would never dare to go. The suicide forests of New Mexico. These are not just tales of tragedy, but whispers of restless spirits, flickering shadows, and the chilling reminders that some souls never find peace. So pour yourself something warm, settle into your favorite chair, and let the darkness of these stories wrap around you like a familiar blanket. But be warned, the trees may be listening. Lincoln National Forest stretches across more than 1 million acres of rugged New Mexico wilderness, a place where towering pines scrape the sky and shadows stretch long between the trunks. To most visitors, it's a landscape of beauty, a refuge for hikers, campers, and those seeking solitude. But deep within this forest is a place whispered about in hushed tones by locals. A patch of woods they call the Hanging Pines. Unlike the postcard vistas of the forest, this section is heavy, still, and unsettling, as though the trees themselves remember something too terrible to let go. The legend of the Hanging Pines reaches back to the Great Depression, when poverty and despair gripped the Southwest. Families came west in search of work, some camping in the forest when they had nowhere else to go. For a few who could not endure the hopelessness any longer, the trees offered what they believed to be escape. Stories tell of men and women who fashioned crude nooses from rope or belts, climbing the tall pines to take their final steps into silence. Their bodies were often found swinging among the branches, and with each new tragedy, the forest seemed to grow heavier, as if swallowing the pain of those who died there. Modern visitors who wander into this part of the forest often describe an overwhelming sense of unease. It starts subtly. The wind dies, the forest grows quiet, and even the birds seem to avoid the canopy. Some hikers have said they suddenly felt watched, as though dozens of unseen eyes were following them. Others claim to hear the faint sound of creaking rope above their heads, even when the branches are still. When they look up, the trees appear normal, though many have walked away swearing they saw shadows swaying where nothing should be. One of the most unsettling accounts comes from a park ranger in the 1970s. He was patrolling the area after reports of trespassers and found a set of boot prints leading off the trail. The prints continued for several yards before stopping abruptly at the base of an old pine. Expecting to find someone hiding, he shone his flashlight into the branches. To his horror, he claimed he saw a figure suspended in the air, limp and swaying. When he blinked, the vision was gone, the branches bare and still. Shaken, the ranger turned in his resignation weeks later, saying he could no longer walk those woods without remembering the sight. Locals warn that the Hanging Pines do more than echo with the past. They reach into the present, luring the living. More than one hiker has admitted to a sudden, overwhelming pull to climb a tree or step off the trail, an urge that vanished only when they fled the grove. Paranormal investigators who have visited report their equipment malfunctioning. Cameras shut down unexpectedly, batteries drain within minutes, and audio recorders pick up faint voices, whispering words no one can fully decipher. Some sound like cries for help. Others, more chillingly, resemble laughter, a hollow, broken sound that leaves listeners rattled. Campers who dared to pitch tents nearby describe long, restless nights. Some wake to footsteps circling their camp, slow and deliberate, crunching on the pine needles without ever revealing a source. Others have spoken of waking to the sensation of rope fibers brushing against their skin, or the feeling that something dangled just above their tent, waiting. A few have left abruptly in the middle of the night, unable to endure the oppressive atmosphere pressing down on them. One particularly eerie story involves a group of college students who camped in the area as part of a weekend adventure. They laughed off the local warnings, eager to test their bravery. But by midnight, they reported hearing what they thought was a man crying in the distance. The sound grew louder, circling their campsite, until it seemed to come from above, shining their flashlights into the trees. They swore they saw multiple figures swaying in the branches, their faces obscured by shadow. Terrified, the group fled, abandoning their gear. When they returned with rangers the next day, their tents were intact, but the branches were empty. The students never camped again, each of them insisting that what they saw was real. Some folklorists suggest that the hanging pines serve as a reminder of collective trauma, that places where despair has taken root carry an energy of their own. Whether this energy is a product of imagination or something darker is left to interpretation. Yet it's undeniable that the area has a reputation for tragedy. Over the years, more reports of suicides have surfaced, though details are often kept quiet to protect grieving families. Each new story only strengthens the legend, making the hanging pines a place where sorrow seems to echo endlessly through the forest. Today, even seasoned outdoorsmen tread carefully when passing through this part of Lincoln National Forest. The air feels colder, the silence unnatural. Some say if you pause too long, you may catch movement at the edge of your vision, a figure hanging in the corner of your eye, vanishing the instant you turn to look. Others believe the trees themselves are cursed, their branches forever marked by the weight of despair. For most, Lincoln National Forest remains a place of peace and beauty. But for those who know its darkest corner, the hanging pines are something else entirely. They are a reminder of human sorrow, etched into the wilderness, where the living walk among the restless dead, and where the sound of creaking rope may never truly fade. The Gigla Wilderness stretches across the heart of southwestern New Mexico, a vast expanse of rugged cliffs, dense pines, and twisting canyons. Its beauty is undeniable, towering rock faces, bathed in golden light, rivers cutting deep through the mesas, and forests that seem to stretch endlessly toward the horizon. But among the winding trails and hidden valleys lies a place that hikers and locals alike avoid, a narrow ravine known simply as the Whispering Place. Unlike the sunlit paths that wind through the wilderness, this ravine carries an unmistakable sense of foreboding, as though the walls themselves remember every sorrow that has touched its depths. The history of the Whispering Ravine is steeped in tragedy. For decades, the cliffs have drawn those who felt hopeless or broken, those seeking an end to their pain. It became a place of whispered desperation, a natural monument to despair. People who wandered here often described hearing voices, soft and persuasive, emanating from the canyon walls. At first, the sounds are faint, barely more than a sigh carried on the wind, but those who lingered too long reported the voices growing clearer, whispering their names, coaxing them closer to the jagged edges of the cliffs. Survivors who turned away speak of promises offered in hushed tones. Relief, peace, a chance to reunite with lost loved ones. Yet even those who resisted say the whispers never truly stopped, echoing in their minds long after they left. Hikers who brave the trails near the ravine often describe a sudden drop in temperature, even on the warmest days. The air feels heavy, almost suffocating, as if the canyon itself holds its breath, watching. Birds and other wildlife avoid the cliffs, leaving an eerie silence that seems unnatural in a wilderness so alive. Some who approach the rim report a strange vertigo, an almost hypnotic pull toward the edge, as though the land itself is urging them to surrender. One seasoned backpacker described feeling invisible hands on his shoulders, pushing gently but insistently toward the abyss, only breaking free when he forced himself to step back. Many have claimed to see shadows moving along the canyon walls, fleeting and impossible to reach. Figures appear just beyond the edge of vision. A woman in white, her hair spilling like water down her back. A man staring silently from a ledge above. Shapes that seem human but vanish when approached. Some visitors swear they have heard laughter, hollow and broken, echoing between the cliffs, an unnatural sound that rises and falls in volume, as though it was speaking directly to them. It is said that the canyon is not just haunted by those who have died, but by the energy of those who considered ending their lives here, leaving behind a lingering, sorrowful presence that twists reality for anyone nearby. A particularly chilling account comes from a group of college students hiking in the ravine during the late 1990s. They had heard local warnings, but dismissed them as superstition. As dusk fell, they entered a narrow section where the cliffs towered above them, the canyon walls narrowing until only a sliver of sky was visible. At first, There was silence, but soon a soft whispering began, almost melodic, calling each of them by name. They followed the sound deeper into the ravine, drawn as though in a trance. Only one of the students managed to break free, screaming for the others to follow. When they finally regrouped at the trailhead, they realized that the canyon had shifted subtly, and the paths they had taken seemed unfamiliar, as if the ravine itself had rearranged to hold them inside. None of them ever returned to hike the Gila again. Locals often advise that the Whispering Ravine is not a place to linger. Those who hear the voices are cautioned to keep moving, to never stop at the edge of the cliffs. Some believe that those who succumb to the lure do not vanish completely, they remain trapped, their energy feeding the canyon, their whispers joining the chorus of the lost, calling out to the next soul who wanders too close. Hikers report hearing cries of warning. Others hear weeping and soft murmurs in languages they cannot understand. Occasionally, a lost backpacker emerges days later, disoriented and silent, unable to explain what kept them from stepping fully over the edge, or how they found their way back. Paranormal investigators, who have ventured into the ravine with cameras and audio recorders, report unusual phenomena. Batteries die inexplicably, flashlights flicker even when fully charged, and microphones capture whispers that seem to come from nowhere. Some recordings pick up distinct phrases. "Come closer, it's peaceful now, and you'll see them soon." When investigators play back these recordings, the whispers sound distant yet urgent, compelling yet frightening, as if the canyon itself is attempting to communicate across time and space. Despite, or perhaps because of its terrifying reputation, the Whispering Ravine remains a destination for thrill seekers and ghost hunters. Many approach with skepticism, only to leave shaken, haunted by the sounds they cannot explain. Even those who merely pass the cliffs report an oppressive feeling that follows them for days, an emotional weight that seems impossible to shake. The Gila Wilderness is beautiful, full of life and breathtaking vistas. But the Whispering Ravine is a stark reminder that some places are shaped not just by geology, but by the suffering and sorrow of those who once stood on their edges. For all its danger, the ravine's lure is undeniable. The whispers persist, calling softly from the canyon walls, promising release to those who listen. Visitors often say that once they have heard the voices, they never forget them. The Gila keeps its secrets well, holding fast to the stories of despair, loss, and restless spirits, and those who wander too close find themselves not just in a wilderness of rocks and trees, but in a place where the echoes of the past reach out to touch the present, where the sorrow of countless souls lingers in the wind, and where a single whisper might be enough to change a life forever. Carson National Forest, with its towering aspens and dense pine thickets, is a wilderness that has long captured the imagination of hikers, hunters, and campers. Its beauty is undeniable. Sunlight filters through the leaves in scattered beams, and the scent of pine resin fills the air. But deep within this vast expanse lies a trail that many locals refuse to travel after dark, a path that has earned a name whispered in fear: Lantern Man's Path. Unlike the well-trodden trails that invite exploration, this stretch of forest carries an uneasy weight, as though it remembers the sorrow and despair of those who once wandered here. The legend of Lantern Man begins in the early 1900s with a logger named Elias Hart. Elias was known for his skill in the forest, but his life took a dark turn after losing his family in a tragic accident. Consumed by grief and hopelessness, he disappeared into the woods, carrying only a small lantern to light his way. Days later, his body was discovered suspended from a tall pine along what would later become Lantern Man's Path. Locals say that even after death, Elias did not leave the forest. His spirit, fueled by sorrow, became bound to the trail, wandering with his lantern as a guide and a warning. Visitors to the trail often speak of a dim light flickering in the distance, appearing just beyond the reach of their flashlights. At first, it seems like another hiker, a fellow traveler navigating the dark. But the closer one gets, the more unnatural the light becomes. It hovers between the trees, swaying in a rhythm that mimics breathing, moving against the wind. Some who have followed it report becoming disoriented, finding themselves retracing steps along the same section of trail, no matter how far they walk. The lantern seems to draw them in, leading them deeper into the forest, further from safety. Campers who have dared to stay overnight near the path describe strange phenomena. In the dead of night, they hear the soft crunch of footsteps on pine needles, slow and deliberate, yet there is no one in sight. Occasionally, the rustle of underbrush suggests something moving just out of view. Some have awakened to the lantern itself, hovering near their tent, its light flickering on and off, though no one is holding it. The air grows cold, unnaturally so, and a heavy silence settles over the trees, pressing down on the campers as if the forest itself were holding its breath. One particularly chilling account comes from a pair of hunters who had set out at dusk. They laughed off the warnings they had heard about Lantern Man's path, certain that these were merely old stories designed to keep curious hikers away. But as night fell and the forest grew darker, they noticed a faint amber glow between the trunks. Thinking it was another camper, they called out, but there was no reply. The lantern moved toward them slowly, deliberately, and as it drew near, they noticed a faint outline of a figure behind it, a man, suspended slightly above the ground, his eyes empty, his face pale. Terrified, the hunters fled, only to find themselves circling the same grove repeatedly. Hours later, they stumbled back onto the main trail, disoriented and shaken, swearing never to return. Lantern Man is said to be restless, forever walking the trail, carrying the light that guides the lost or entices them. Some believe he seeks company, drawing wandering souls into the forest to share in his eternal sorrow. Others think the lantern is a trap, a lure to test the courage of those who enter the woods after dark. In either case, those who see it rarely forget the experience. Many report nightmares filled with flickering light, shadowy figures, and the sensation of being followed by unseen eyes. Paranormal investigators who have ventured along Lantern Man's path often encounter unexplained malfunctions with their equipment. Cameras die suddenly, batteries drain inexplicably, and audio devices capture faint whispers. On playback, the voices are almost intelligible, sometimes calling a name, sometimes repeating the word come, sometimes sighing in a long, mournful cadence. Some investigators report sudden feelings of pressure on their shoulders or a tug on their clothing, as though invisible hands are guiding or warning them. Others have captured brief, shadowy figures in their photographs, hovering just beyond the light of their flashlights, never fully visible, yet undeniably present. Those who live near Carson National Forest advise newcomers to avoid Lantern Man's path at night. Even during the day, there is an unsettling quality to the trail. A silence that seems unnatural, a heaviness that sits in the chest, and the occasional flicker of light in the distance that disappears when approached. Some believe that anyone who follows the lantern too closely risks being drawn into the forest, never to return. Stories persist of hikers found days later, wandering in a daze, their memories fragmented, unable to explain how they ended up so far from the trailhead. Others simply vanish, leaving no trace behind. The forest seems to have a memory of its own, a consciousness shaped by the grief and despair of Elias, Hart, and the many others who have come seeking solace within its depths. The lantern, suspended in amber light, becomes a symbol of that lingering sorrow. It moves, it beckons, it watches, and it is always just out of reach, a ghostly companion to those brave enough or foolish enough to walk Lantern Man's path. For many, Carson National Forest remains a beautiful and inviting wilderness, filled with trails, rivers, and the scent of pine on the wind. But for those who know its darkest corners, Lantern Man's path is something else entirely. A trail where sorrow takes shape, where light lures the living toward despair, and where a grief-stricken spirit wanders forever, searching for someone to follow him into the shadows. Even the most experienced hikers tread carefully here, aware that the amber glow is more than just a flicker of light. It is a warning, a presence, and a haunting that will linger in the mind long after leaving the forest behind. Cibola National Forest stretches across over 1 million acres of rugged wilderness in central New Mexico, a landscape of rolling hills, dense pine groves, and hidden clearings. Most visitors are drawn to its trails for hiking, bird watching, or the simple serenity of being surrounded by untouched forests. But deep within this vast expanse lies a place locals rarely speak of aloud, a small clearing known as the Black Cross Clearing. Unlike the surrounding forest, where sunlight filters softly through the branches and wildlife thrives, this clearing feels wrong in ways that cannot be explained. The air is heavy, the ground barren, and at its center stands a burned black cross, a haunting marker that the forest itself seems unwilling to reclaim. Oral history places the origin of the Black Cross Clearing in the 1940s, during a time of hardship and despair. Four friends, each struggling with circumstances too painful to endure, made a pact in this remote corner of the forest. Seeking a final escape together, they hanged themselves from a massive oak tree that still stands at the center of the clearing. When authorities arrived and removed their bodies, the earth beneath the tree was found blackened and scorched, as if the soil itself had absorbed the anguish of their final moments. Since then, no grass has grown in that small plot of land. Visitors report that even moss and weeds avoid it, leaving a stark patch of earth that is impossibly dark against the vibrant greens of the surrounding forest. Hikers and campers who stumble across the clearing often feel an immediate sense of unease. The atmosphere is oppressive, as though the forest itself is pressing down upon them. Many report a strange chill that does not correspond to the weather or elevation, a cold that sinks into the bones. Some claim to hear whispers among the pines, faint voices carried on a breeze that seems unnaturally still. These whispers are often described as urgent and sorrowful, sometimes repeating words like come or stay, as though the forest is trying to speak directly to anyone who enters. Visitors also report visual phenomena. Shadows appear near the edges of the clearing, darting between the trees and vanishing when approached. On occasion, people have glimpsed pale figures standing silently near the oak, their features blurred or indistinct. Some say they see the four friends themselves, lingering in the place of their deaths, bound eternally to the clearing and the blackened cross. They reportedly remain motionless, watching any who dare to trespass, sometimes vanishing when looked at directly, only to reappear from the corner of one's eye. The sense of time itself seems distorted within the clearing. Several hikers have recounted experiences where hours pass like minutes, or where the sun's position shifts unnaturally while they remain in place. Some have experienced sudden, unexplained fatigue, an overwhelming sense of dread that forces them to leave the area immediately. Those who resist the urge to flee often find themselves drawn deeper into the clearing, closer to the blackened oak and its burned cross, as if the land itself is guiding them toward an unknown fate. One particularly chilling account comes from a ranger who patrolled Cibola National Forest in the late 1970s. He had heard the local warnings but, like many, dismissed them as superstition. On a late summer afternoon, he wandered into the clearing to inspect a trail near the oak. At first, everything seemed normal. The wind rustled the leaves. Birds called from the trees, but as he stepped closer to the burned cross, the temperature dropped sharply. He reported seeing faint rope-like shadows hanging from the branches above, swaying though there was no wind. The ranger claimed to hear soft laughter, hollow and distant, followed by a chorus of low whispers that called his name. Terrified, he turned to leave, but he swore the clearing seemed to stretch farther than it should have, making his path back to the trailhead unnervingly long. He left the forest soon after, saying he could never walk near the Black Cross Clearing without feeling the weight of those four lost souls pressing down on him. Paranormal investigators and ghost enthusiasts who have visited the clearing report similar phenomena. Cameras malfunction, batteries die quickly, and audio recorders often pick up faint, moaning, or indistinct voices. Some have claimed to see flashes of movement in their peripheral vision, only to find nothing when they look directly. Others speak of an overwhelming sensation of being watched, as if countless unseen eyes are tracking their every move. Despite repeated attempts to study the clearing scientifically, no clear explanation has ever been found, reinforcing the belief that the Black Cross Clearing is a place beyond ordinary understanding. Locals advise caution, suggesting that anyone who finds the clearing should leave immediately and avoid lingering. The forest surrounding the clearing is peaceful, even inviting, but within that small plot of blackened earth, something lingers, a sorrow that refuses to dissipate, a presence that seems to feed on grief and despair. Some claim that if you pause too long near the blackened oak, you might catch a fleeting glimpse of the four friends, their faces pale and eyes hollow, silently reaching out as though to call you into their eternal vigil. Despite the warnings and the tales, the clearing continues to draw the curious, the thrill-seekers, and the daring, and while few stay long enough to confront whatever lingers there, most leave with a sense of unease, an unshakable impression that the Black Cross clearing is not merely a place, but a repository of sorrow, a scar upon the forest that refuses to heal. Those who walk into Sabala National Forest's hidden corners come expecting nature, adventure, or solitude, but for anyone who steps into the Black Cross clearing, they encounter something far older, far darker, and far more restless than they ever imagined. The Pecos Wilderness, part of the vast Santa Fe National Forest, is a land of shadow and solitude. Its trails twist unpredictably, often vanishing into dense groves where sunlight barely reaches the forest floor. Pine needles carpet the ground, softening footsteps, and the air carries the scent of resin and damp earth. For hikers seeking isolation or the beauty of New Mexico's wild landscapes, the Pecos Wilderness is a haven. Yet, beneath its serene surface lies a darkness that few speak of openly, a presence known among locals as the Watcher. The story of the Watcher dates back decades, to a man whose despair led him to the remote reaches of the Pecos. Driven by sorrow, he took his own life deep in the wilderness, leaving behind nothing but whispered warnings in the trees. Unlike the restless spirits of others who linger silently, the Watcher does not remain stationary. Survivors claim that he moves through the forest, watching from the shadows, following travelers along winding trails. He is rarely seen directly. Instead, people sense him, a shift in the air, a rustle of pine needles, a shadow glimpsed in the corner of their vision. Those who look directly often see nothing, yet the feeling of being observed never leaves them. Hikers and campers report a distinct pattern. It begins with a sensation of being watched. A trail that seemed familiar suddenly feels labyrinthian, and sounds of snapping twigs appear where no one could be. Some describe glimpses of a tall figure moving silently between the pines, only to vanish when approached. Others hear whispers carried on the wind, voices so faint that they might be imagined, yet impossible to ignore. The whispers often call the listener's name, beckoning them deeper into the wilderness. Those who resist the lure sometimes swear that the Watcher alters the terrain itself, guiding them along paths they didn't intend to take, circling them endlessly through the dense trees. One chilling account comes from a group of backpackers who entered the Pecos Wilderness for a weekend trek. They had heard the warnings but laughed them off, eager for adventure. On the second night, while setting up camp near a ridge, they noticed shadows shifting unnaturally among the trees. One hiker caught sight of a pale figure standing motionless at the far edge of the clearing, staring directly at them. He pointed, and when the others turned, the figure had vanished without a trace. As night fell, the group reported hearing footsteps circling their tents, soft and deliberate. The sound never approached closely, yet it never left either. At dawn, when they packed to leave, the trail they had taken seemed unfamiliar, as if the forest itself had been rearranged overnight. The hikers exited the wilderness, shaken, forever haunted by the feeling of eyes following them from the tree line. Survivors who have spent time near the areas associated with the Watcher describe more than mere unease. Many report sudden chills that wash over them in the middle of summer. The sensation of cold hands brushing against their shoulders, or a pressure in the chest that makes movement difficult. Some hear low murmurs just beyond comprehension, whispers that seem to mimic their own thoughts or fears. Photographs taken near the sightings often reveal subtle distortions. Blurred figures standing among the pines, or shadows cast in impossible directions. Electronics frequently malfunction, compasses spin inexplicably, and flashlights flicker despite fresh batteries. The Watcher is said to have a particular focus. Those who wander alone, Many reports involve hikers who stray off the main trail, their attention caught by a glimmer of movement or a sound that seems out of place. Those who travel in pairs or groups rarely see him directly, though they often report the lingering feeling of being observed. Some suggest that he is drawn to despair, seeking those who might be vulnerable to his presence, whispering to them with promises of comfort or release. Others claim he is simply bound to the wilderness itself, a sentinel shaped by tragedy, patrolling the forests and ensuring no one forgets the sorrow that gave him form. Campers who have spent the night near his usual haunts often describe unsettling phenomena that escalate as darkness deepens. Shadows stretch unnaturally, shifting across the forest floor, even when the moonlight is steady. Sudden gusts of wind blow through the trees without explanation, carrying the faint sound of a man's sigh. Some have woken to the feeling of a presence hovering just beyond their tent, unseen but tangible. Others report waking to find their gear moved, footprints in the soil that do not match their own, and tree branches broken at heights far above where any human could reach. Even experienced wilderness guides tread carefully in these areas, acknowledging that the watcher is more than a mere tale. Some believe he is a manifestation of the collective grief that has permeated the Pecos wilderness over decades, his presence a reminder that despair leaves a mark that the forest never forgets. Others warn that anyone who lingers too long risks being drawn into a state of disorientation or trance, circling the woods endlessly, much like those who have encountered him in the past. For those who know the stories, the Pecos wilderness remains a place of caution. Its beauty is undeniable, yet it is tempered by the presence of the watcher, a restless spirit whose eyes are always upon the trees. Hikers who follow the main trails and leave at sunset rarely feel his gaze, but for those who stray or linger, there is a sensation that never fades, the certainty that someone or something is walking with them, silent yet vigilant, guiding them, observing them, and waiting. The Sandia Mountains rise abruptly on the eastern edge of Albuquerque, their rugged slopes casting long shadows over the city below. To most, they are a place of beauty and adventure, where hikers traverse winding trails and climbers test their skill on sheer cliffs. But hidden among the dense pines and rocky outcrops lies a path that few dare to tread after dark, the Red Trail. Unlike the more popular trails, this stretch carries a history of despair, a legacy of lives lost, and stories that have grown into legend among locals. The Red Trail is infamous for its cliffs, sheer drops that have claimed the lives of countless individuals over decades. Hikers have long whispered about strange occurrences along the trail, especially after rain. Crimson stains seem to appear on the rocks, staining the earth as though it itself bleeds. Some dismiss it as iron-rich soil or runoff from the red sandstone, but those who know the stories claim it is something far darker, the lingering mark of those who ended their lives here. Locals say the mountain remembers, and that memory seeps into the stones, carried on the wind like a faint, sorrowful cry. Visitors often report an unsettling feeling of being followed. It begins subtly, a shift in the air, a whisper of movement behind them, the soft snap of pine needles under invisible feet. Many have described heavy, labored breathing just over their shoulder, or the crunch of footsteps gaining pace as if someone is jogging close behind. Yet when they turn, no one is there. The sensation grows more oppressive as hikers approach the cliff edges, a tangible weight pressing at their chest, a premonition that something is watching. Those who linger too long say the air itself seems to thicken, almost as though the mountain is holding its breath, waiting. One hiker, a seasoned climber familiar with the Sandia slopes, described an encounter that left him shaken for weeks. As he ascended a narrow portion of the trail, he heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind him, matching his own pace. Thinking it was another hiker, he called out, but only the echo of his voice answered him. When he turned, he saw nothing but shifting shadows among the trees. Later, at a bend where the trail drops sharply, he swore he glimpsed a figure pacing back and forth along the path, a man with his face blurred, clothes torn, moving with a jerky, unnatural gait. The figure vanished when he blinked, leaving only the echo of dripping water. though no streams or puddles were nearby. The Red Trail is not only haunted by visual apparitions. At night, the forest seems to come alive with sounds that have no source. Faint cries rise and fall in the wind, voices that sometimes call a hiker's name. Others hear laughter, hollow and broken, or the soft, rhythmic tapping of footsteps circling their camp. Paranormal investigators who have ventured onto the trail report equipment malfunctions, flashlights flicker without cause. Cameras capture shadows where nothing should be, and batteries drain far quicker than expected. Some have recorded faint whispers urging them to come closer to the cliff edges. Words that echo the promises of release and peace, drawing listeners nearer to danger. Locals tell stories of ghostly figures that haunt the trail after dusk. They appear silently, pacing the slopes with slow, deliberate movements. Their faces are indistinct, blurred as if caught between life and death. Their clothing is tattered and dark, hanging limply from their forms. Some hikers have felt them brush past, cold and insubstantial, only to vanish when attention is given. At times, multiple figures appear at once, scattered along the trail, walking in a silent procession toward the cliffs. Those who witness them rarely speak of it afterward, their eyes reflecting a mixture of fear and disbelief. The mountain itself seems to resist intrusion. Hikers report sudden fog rolling in, dense and suffocating, even on otherwise clear days. Trails seem to shift subtly, paths becoming unfamiliar in a matter of steps, as if the forest is rearranging to confound and isolate visitors. Some say the spirits of the Red Trail are drawn to those who enter with uncertainty or despair in their hearts, preying on the vulnerable and testing the courage of the living. Others suggest that the trail is a threshold, a place where grief lingers so long it imprints itself on the land, binding both the living and the dead in an uneasy limbo. Even during daylight, there is a palpable difference along the Red Trail. The air feels heavier, the light dimmer beneath the thick canopy of pine and cedar. Birds avoid the area, and wildlife is noticeably scarce. Some hikers describe seeing fleeting shadows move against the sunlight, shapes that vanish when approached. Others feel sudden chills, or the sensation that unseen eyes are watching from the cliffs above. Many leave with the unmistakable impression that the trail is alive, aware of their presence, and unwilling to let them pass unobserved. Despite its reputation, the Red Trail continues to attract those drawn to danger, curiosity, or the allure of the supernatural. Yet those who linger often leave changed, haunted by the sensation of being pursued, the memory of blurred faces in torn clothing, and the echoing sound of water where none should be. The Sandia Mountains rise majestically over Albuquerque, serene to most eyes. But for those who know the Red Trail, they are a reminder that beauty can harbor despair, and that the mountain keeps its dead close, whispering in the wind, pacing the forest, and watching silently from the shadows. The Manzano Mountains rise in rugged waves across central New Mexico, their slopes blanketed with dense pine and juniper forests. Among these peaks lies a place shrouded in mystery and dread, a grove locals call the Forgotten Grove. Unlike the well-traveled trails that wind across the Manzano Range, this small patch of trees seems untouched by time, or perhaps cursed by it. Those who enter report a disorienting sensation, as if hours pass in minutes, and yet some moments linger endlessly. The grove is quiet to quiet and carries a weight that is almost tangible, pressing on the chest of anyone who dares to wander beneath its branches. The origin of the Forgotten Grove is tied to a mining camp that existed in the 1800s. Prospectors had come seeking fortune, carving cabins and shafts into the mountainside, eking out a life in harsh conditions. But hardship and despair took their toll. Several men, overcome by isolation and misfortune, ended their own lives within the grove. Locals whispered that their deaths left an imprint on the land itself, a darkness that refused to dissipate. Over time, the camp vanished, the cabins decayed, and the forest slowly reclaimed the area, but the sorrow lingered. Travelers today say that the grove retains the echo of those tragedies, manifesting in ways that are both subtle and terrifying. Visitors describe entering the grove and immediately feeling a strange distortion of time. Watches stop ticking, clocks freeze, even when brought from outside. Electronic devices fail inexplicably. Batteries drain within minutes. Hikers report walking along winding trails, only to find themselves returning to the same cluster of trees. The forest looping in on itself like a trap. Some claim to hear faint whispers, soft and unintelligible at first, then forming words that seem both welcoming and threatening. This way, no back, stay. These voices seem to guide travelers in circles, leading them deeper into the grove and never toward the exit. One camper, a man with years of wilderness experience, recounted an encounter that left him shaken for months. He had set up camp near the center of the grove, intending to spend a single night before continuing his hike. At dusk, he noticed what appeared to be a child standing beneath a low branch, silhouetted against the fading light. As he approached, the figure began to sway gently, a rope loosely hanging from the tree above. The man screamed and ran forward, only to witness the boy dissolve into a cloud of black ash, scattering into the wind. He later insisted that no one could have been there, yet the memory of the figure haunted him endlessly. Others have described similar apparitions. Shadows flicker at the edges of vision. Ropes swing from branches, though no one is present, and trees seem to shift positions when unobserved. Campers report hearing footsteps pacing slowly through the grove, always just out of sight, and whispers that mimic the sound of their own voices, calling their names or repeating their fears. Some hikers have been found days later, wandering in circles, disoriented and exhausted, unable to explain how they had moved from one point to another. The forest seems alive, responsive to those within it, twisting paths and echoing their movements back at them. One of the most persistent aspects of the Forgotten Grove is the sensation of being watched. Travelers frequently speak of invisible eyes tracking them from between the trees. Shadows appear on the periphery, dark shapes that vanish the moment one turns to confront them. On occasion, the wind carries the sound of creaking ropes or muffled cries, as if the trees themselves are echoing the tragedies that occurred so long ago. Even seasoned hunters and campers, familiar with the forests of New Mexico, have reported an instinctive urge to leave immediately, an unshakable feeling of danger that cannot be explained by natural causes. Paranormal investigators who have entered the grove often report malfunctions with equipment, consistent with the experiences of hikers. Cameras capture fleeting shadows, microphones pick up whispers and faint, distorted cries. Some claim that the grove seems to interfere with electronic signals, making radios and GPS units unreliable. Attempts to document the phenomena scientifically often fail, reinforcing the sense that the Forgotten Grove operates under its own rules, bending time, space, and perception to its will. Despite the warnings, some are drawn to the grove by curiosity or a desire to confront the unknown. Those who linger too long often leave with a sense of unease that lingers long after they have returned to civilization. Many speak of the pervasive feeling of sorrow, as if the forest itself remembers the pain of those who perished there. The ground beneath the trees remains strangely barren in spots, and ropes, branches, and shadows seem to reappear night after night, resisting the passage of time and the attempts of nature to reclaim the grove. The Forgotten Grove is a place where the past refuses to die. It is a corner of the Manzano Mountains where despair left a permanent mark, where time can be warped, and where the living are never fully alone. Those who step into the grove may feel guided, watched, or tested by forces beyond understanding. The echoes of the miners and the men who ended their lives persist, shaping the experiences of anyone who dares to enter. The Gemmas Mountains, with their rugged peaks and dense forests, are a place of natural beauty, where winding trails lead to hidden streams and secluded meadows. Yet among these wild spaces lies one particular meadow that defies the life around it, a place known simply as the Silent Meadow. Unlike the surrounding forest, where birds call and wind whispers through the pines, this meadow is unnervingly still. The air itself seems heavy, and a silence hangs that is almost tangible, pressing on the chest of anyone who steps within its boundaries. Visitors often say it feels as though the world outside has vanished, leaving only the meadow and a lingering, sorrowful presence. The origins of the silent meadow are steeped in tragedy. Decades ago, three sisters, each struggling under the weight of despair, wandered into the Jemez woods one afternoon. Locals recall that their disappearance sparked frantic searches, with friends and family scouring trails and cliffs for days. When the sisters were finally found, they were lying side by side beneath a lone tree at the center of the meadow. The circumstances of their deaths were unclear, but their passing left an imprint on the land that many say endures to this day. The meadow, once a place of wildflowers and life, became quiet and strange, as if mourning the sisters who never returned. Hikers who stumble upon the meadow often describe an immediate sense of unease. The first thing many notice is the unnatural silence: no rustling leaves, no bird calls, no insects buzzing. Even on windy days, the air seems still, as though the meadow itself absorbs sound. Some report hearing faint crying carried on the wind, a soft, heartbreaking sound that seems close, yet impossible to locate. When they turn to look, the meadow appears empty, the grass swaying gently in an unseen breeze. The crying persists, almost beckoning, drawing visitors closer to the center of the clearing. Several people have recounted glimpsing the sisters themselves. They are described as pale and ethereal, hand in hand, standing together beneath the lone tree. Their faces are expressionless, their eyes dark and hollow, yet filled with a weight of sadness that chills those who encounter them. Witnesses say that when the sisters appear, a strange pressure descends over the meadow, and the temperature drops sharply. Footsteps slow, voices falter, and even the most seasoned hikers feel a compulsion to leave. The sisters do not speak, but their presence is undeniably felt, a silent warning that intruders are unwelcome. One camper described an encounter in the summer months. He had hiked into the Jemez, seeking solitude, and had wandered off the marked trail, eventually finding the meadow by chance. At first, he was enchanted by the dense wildflowers and the surrounding cliffs. But as he stepped into the clearing, the sounds of the forest vanished, replaced by an eerie, almost oppressive silence. Then came the soft sobbing, just beyond his vision. When he turned, there was no one. Moments later, he saw three pale figures, standing in a tight line beneath the tree, their hands linked. They watched him without movement, and though he tried to call out, his voice caught in his throat. Panicked, he retreated from the meadow, the figures remaining behind, unmoving, their gaze following him until he vanished among the trees. Other accounts speak of more subtle disturbances. People report compasses spinning wildly within the meadow, GPS devices failing, and cameras capturing fleeting shadows that disappear when reviewed. Some hikers experience a disorienting sense of time. A few minutes spent wandering can feel like hours, or vice versa. Several visitors have reported feeling watched even when the sisters are not visible. A lingering impression that someone or something is tracking their movements. Local lore suggests that the sisters' spirits are bound to the meadow, lingering as guardians and mourners. Some believe the cries are a warning, a reminder of their own tragic fates, and that the sisters do not seek harm but are drawn to those who wander too close. Others suggest a more malevolent presence, arguing that the meadow exerts a subtle influence, coaxing visitors to step too far, to linger too long, and to become trapped in a web of grief and silence. Despite the eerie tales, the meadow still draws hikers, paranormal enthusiasts, and the curious. Those who enter often speak of a mix of awe and terror. The beauty of the open grass and distant cliffs is undeniable, yet it is overshadowed by the oppressive quiet and the feeling of being observed. Some have attempted to linger, photographing or recording the meadow, but most report that no evidence captures the full experience. Audio recordings fail to pick up the faint crying, cameras show only shadows, and compasses refuse to point north. The silent meadow is a place where the natural world and the supernatural intertwine. Its isolation and the history of the three sisters create a space where grief lingers in the air, where time bends, and where those who enter are confronted with the weight of sorrow that refuses to leave. The sisters' presence, ethereal, pale, and unyielding, remains a haunting reminder of the past. watching silently as the living tread through a landscape shaped by despair. For those who stumble across the meadow, the warning is clear. Linger too long, and the forest may not release you easily. The silent meadow is more than a clearing. It is a threshold between the living and the lost, a place where the echoes of tragedy remain etched into the grass and soil. The wind may cease, birds may refuse to sing, and all sound may vanish, but the presence of the sisters persists, hand in hand, watching patiently, waiting for the next intruder to step into their silent domain. Chaco Canyon, famed for its ancient Puebloan ruins and rich archaeological history, holds a stark beauty among the deserts of northwestern New Mexico. Sunlight spills across sandstone cliffs, and winds carve intricate patterns into the canyon walls. By day, it is a place of wonder, where history whispers through stone walls and kivas, yet hidden among the cottonwood groves and juniper trees. That line, the canyon, are stories far darker than any relic of the past, tales of despair, death, and lingering spirits that refuse to rest. Locals know this area not only for its cultural significance, but also for the chilling phenomena collectively called the rope shadows. The legend begins decades ago, when the canyon was a haven for those seeking isolation. The cliffs, tall and unforgiving, became sites where desperate individuals ended their lives, leaving sorrow etched into the land. Over the years, stories emerged of eerie shadows appearing on canyon walls, dark shapes that resembled ropes swaying in the wind, though no bodies or ropes could be found. Witnesses insist these shadows move with a life of their own, stretching and twisting, as if the canyon itself is replaying moments of grief that occurred long ago. Visitors to the area often speak of an oppressive weight, an almost palpable sense of being watched, particularly at dusk, when shadows stretch long across the rocks. Hikers have described approaching a cliff face and seeing rope-like silhouettes dangling from high branches, though the trees above are bare. Some say the shadows seem three-dimensional, distinct from the natural contours of the canyon wall. Others have reported seeing multiple shadows at once, moving independently yet eerily synchronized, as if enacting a tragic choreography that no living witness should observe. At night, the canyon transforms further. The wind whistles through the narrow passages, carrying faint, distorted sounds that resemble rope snapping and soft, agonized cries. Ghost hunters and paranormal enthusiasts who have ventured into the area with recording equipment often capture audio EVP's electronic voice phenomena containing chilling sounds. Some record what they describe as the sharp crack of rope under strain, immediately followed by a scream filled with despair. Others hear murmured names or faint whispers pleading for help. Playback sometimes reveals sounds unnoticed in real time, as if the canyon itself holds its secrets until carefully observed. One notable account comes from a group of paranormal investigators who spent a night near a cliff known as Whispering Edge. They set up cameras along the canyon walls, hoping to document the mysterious rope shadows. Around midnight, the team reported seeing shadows rise along the sandstone, stretching as though long-forgotten bodies had returned to dangle once more. A sudden gust caused all of their recording equipment to flicker, and one investigator swore she heard a faint voice whispering her name from above. When they reviewed the footage in daylight, the shadows were present on video, swaying against the cliffs with no corresponding objects or ropes in sight. The experience left the team shaken, with several members refusing to return to the canyon after sunset. Hikers who stumble into these areas without knowledge of the legends often describe immediate unease. Some feel compelled to turn back, sensing that something unseen is observing their every move. The shadows seem to stretch unnaturally long or bend in ways that defy normal light and perspective. Occasionally, travelers report feeling sudden chills or a sense of vertigo, particularly near the cliffs where the rope shadows appear most pronounced. Many describe the air as heavy and oppressive, carrying the faint scent of dry leaves and old wood, yet tinged with something indefinable, almost metallic-like, the lingering presence of trauma. Even during the day, anomalies persist. Some visitors claim that when sunlight strikes the cliffs at specific angles, faint rope-like patterns emerge that are not visible at other times. Birds avoid these areas, and small animals rarely approach the canyon floor near the haunted cliffs. Locals believe the canyon has absorbed the anguish of the departed, leaving the rope shadows as a haunting reflection of the pain once inflicted on the land. The canyon is alive in a way that is subtle, yet undeniable, an echo of despair etched into stone, waiting for anyone to notice. A few daring individuals have reported seeing full apparitions in the canyon. Figures, translucent and darkened, appear along the cliff edges, sometimes moving in sync with the shadows. Witnesses describe these specters as suspended, limbless shapes hanging silently, watching intruders pass. Others have seen fleeting glimpses of bodies that vanish when approached, leaving only the rope-shaped shadows behind. These encounters are rare, but leave a lasting imprint on those who experience them. Paranormal researchers speculate that the rope shadows are more than mere hallucinations or tricks of the light. Some suggest the canyon holds residual energy from the suicides that occurred there, a form of imprint that manifests visually and audibly. Others believe it is the canyon itself, a living, breathing entity responding to human grief, replaying tragedies as shadows that cling to the cliffs. Whatever the cause, the effect is unmistakable. Visitors feel the weight of lost souls, hear the cries of the departed, and witness inexplicable rope-like shapes that defy natural explanation. The rope shadows of Chaco Canyon are a stark reminder that beauty and terror can coexist. By day, the canyon is serene and historic, but by night or even in moments of quiet observation, the shadows of despair reveal themselves. Hikers, ghost hunters, and curious travelers are left with the unsettling realization that some marks on the land cannot be erased. The canyon holds its secrets close, and in its quiet recesses, the rope shadows continue to sway, replaying a sorrowful history, waiting for those who wander too near. The Zuni Mountains rise in rugged waves across western New Mexico, their dense forests of pine, juniper, and oak concealing trails that twist through steep ravines and hidden valleys. Amid this wilderness lies a place steeped in unease, a location avoided by locals and whispered about in warnings. An old wooden bridge, now abandoned and reclaimed by the Forrest, known as the Cursed Crossing. It is a landmark of tragedy, a site where despair has left an indelible mark on the landscape. Travelers who stumble upon it, particularly at night, rarely forget the experience. The bridge itself is narrow and fragile, built decades ago to span a deep ravine that slices through the mountains. Over the years, the structure fell into disrepair. Planks splintered, railings rotted, and the path faded into the surrounding forest. Yet, despite its dilapidation, the bridge continues to draw attention, particularly from those seeking solitude, adventure, or the unknown. Locals warn that the bridge is cursed, haunted by the memory of those who ended their journeys there, leaving behind echoes of grief and despair. Visitors approaching the bridge often describe a sudden sense of apprehension, as if the forest itself is warning them to turn back. The air grows heavier near the crossing, carrying a chill even on warm nights. Some hikers report hearing footsteps on the bridge behind them, though they are alone. The planks beneath their own feet creak naturally. Yet the sound of other steps is distinct, deliberate, and impossible to ignore. Those who stop and turn to look see nothing, only the shadows of trees and the moonlight reflecting on the ravine below. Still, the sensation of being followed persists, an invisible presence pacing in perfect sync with their own movements. One of the most chilling phenomena occurs after sunset. Witnesses recount seeing a crouched shadow at the edge of the bridge, shivering as though racked with grief. The figure is small, sometimes resembling a young person, other times indistinct and misshapen, but its sorrow is palpable. On several occasions, the shadow has been observed rising suddenly and leaping silently into the depths of the ravine, vanishing without a sound. Those who have witnessed it describe a lingering echo in the air, a low, mournful wail carried on the wind. The experience leaves a lasting impression, an almost physical ache that seems to cling to the bones long after leaving the site. The bridge is not only a visual and auditory hazard, it appears to affect perception itself. Travelers report feeling disoriented, as if the forest and ravine shift around them. Paths leading to the bridge seem to loop back on themselves, and trees appear closer or farther than they should. Some hikers say that the forest amplifies sound selectively. A whisper seems to originate from directly behind them, then fades into silence when they spin around. Electronic devices often malfunction in the vicinity. Flashlights flicker or die entirely. GPS signals fail, and cell phones lose reception inexplicably. Paranormal investigators attribute these disturbances to residual energy concentrated at the site, a manifestation of the suffering that occurred there. Local folklore adds layers of dread to the already eerie location. Stories suggest that the bridge was once the site of multiple suicides, where travelers burdened by sorrow or misfortune sought escape from life's hardships. Some claim that the spirits of the deceased linger, compelled to repeat their final moments. Others believe that the bridge has absorbed the despair of these individuals, creating a nexus of sorrow that affects anyone who dares to cross it. Hikers and explorers have shared accounts of being urged forward by a strange force, a compulsion to walk toward the edge despite knowing the danger. Those who resist feel the presence retreat temporarily, only to return with a more insistent pull. One particularly vivid encounter comes from a small group of hikers exploring the bridge in late autumn. They had arrived at dusk, the setting sun casting long shadows over the ravine. As they stepped onto the bridge, the sounds of the forest seemed to vanish, replaced by faint scraping and the soft thud of footsteps behind them. When they turned, the bridge was empty, but the pressure of eyes upon them was undeniable. Suddenly, a crouched figure appeared at the far edge, trembling as if frozen in pain. Moments later, it rose and leaped into the darkness below, leaving the hikers paralyzed with shock. Though no body was visible, they could hear the faintest wail carried on the wind, a sound that lingered long after they fled the bridge. Even during the daytime, the bridge retains its aura of unease. The structure sways slightly in the wind, planks groaning under weight, and shadows often move unnaturally across the ravine. Wildlife avoids the area. Birds rarely perch nearby, and small animals seem reluctant to cross paths with humans here. Visitors have reported feeling watched, a sensation that persists regardless of whether anyone else is present. It is as if the bridge itself holds memory, a repository of grief that imprints on anyone who enters its domain. The cursed crossing is not a place for casual exploration. It is a threshold between the living and the echoes of those who have passed tragically. Each step across the bridge carries the weight of history, of lives ended in despair, and of a sorrow that continues to linger in the shadows and wind. For those who approach at night, the warnings are unmistakable. The footsteps behind them, the crouched shadow at the edge, the silent leap into darkness all are reminders that some places are not meant to be crossed lightly. The Zuni Mountains, though majestic and beautiful, hide corners of deep sorrow. The old wooden bridge is one such place, a relic of tragedy, abandoned yet alive in its memory. Travelers who venture there risk encountering the restless shadows of the past, sensing eyes in the darkness, and hearing the cries of the lost. The cursed crossing endures as a chilling testament to grief and despair, a haunted waypoint where the echoes of those who fell continue to linger, swaying silently with the wind over the ravine below. Taos Canyon, nestled among the rugged peaks of northern New Mexico, is a place of breathtaking vistas and jagged cliffs. By day, sunlight spills across the rocky walls, illuminating hidden alcoves and whispering streams. But beneath this serene exterior lies a dark legend that has haunted the region for generations. Locals speak in hushed tones of a place known as the Screamer, a canyon where tragedy and terror are said to linger long after the living have left. The story begins decades ago with a man whose despair consumed him. Isolated and tormented by personal grief, he sought solitude in the canyon's depths. It is said that he ended his life by fire, a desperate act that left an indelible mark not only on the land but on the spirits that dwell there. Since that time, visitors have reported chilling encounters, describing an audible presence that defies explanation, an endless shriek, echoing off the canyon walls, rising and falling with a terrible rhythm. Those who have heard it describe it as blood-curdling, a sound that pierces the night and shakes the very air with raw anguish. Hikers and campers who venture into the canyon after dusk often report a sudden, oppressive silence that seems to descend from the cliffs above. Birds stop singing, the wind dies in the narrow passages, and even flowing water seems muted. At first, the quiet can feel serene, almost peaceful, but it is a deceptive calm. Then comes the sound, a high-pitched scream, sharp and piercing, bouncing off the rock walls in every direction. Many describe the sensation as disorienting, as though the sound is surrounding them, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. The screams are often accompanied by the feeling of a presence, a restless spirit that moves invisibly among the cliffs. One camper recounted an encounter that left him unable to sleep for weeks. He had pitched his tent near the canyon floor, unaware of the legend. Around midnight, he awoke to the distant sound of screaming. At first, he assumed it was an animal, but the tone was unmistakably human, a scream filled with terror and pain. The noise grew louder, echoing closer, bouncing between the canyon walls in a maddening rhythm. He looked outside the tent and swore he saw a figure, a man-shaped shadow, flickering near a rocky outcrop, his mouth open in an eternal scream. Panicked, the camper fled, abandoning his gear, feeling the sound chase him even as he ran toward the canyon rim. The screamer is not always visible, but its presence is undeniably felt. Visitors describe sudden drops in temperature, gusts of wind that come without warning, and the sensation of being watched from above or behind. Shadows seem to twist unnaturally along the canyon walls, and rocks that should be still appear to shift when unobserved. Some hikers have reported hearing whispers intertwined with the screams, phrases that are unintelligible yet convey an urgent sense of despair. Others speak of a vibration in the ground, subtle but unnerving, as though the very earth trembles in response to the restless spirit. Paranormal investigators have spent nights in the canyon attempting to document the phenomena. Audio recordings frequently capture screams far beyond what the human ear can pick up in real time. Cameras and night vision equipment occasionally record fleeting shadows that vanish when approached. EVPs have captured moans and cries, sometimes punctuated by sharp, high-pitched shrieks. Some theorists suggest that the canyon acts as a natural amplifier, carrying the anguish of the man's final moments in a way that resonates with anyone who enters. Others believe the spirit itself is trapped, doomed to relive its death over and over, screaming endlessly into the night. Even experienced hikers and locals with a deep familiarity with the terrain are unnerved by the screamer. Many avoid the canyon entirely after sunset, and some say that the cries can reach even those on the trails above, echoing unnaturally long distances. The intensity of the sound is said to fluctuate with the moon, becoming sharper and more persistent on clear nights when the canyon walls catch the light just right. Those who try to remain overnight report the same chilling experiences: sudden noises, invisible touches, and the constant feeling of being pursued by a presence that cannot be seen. The legend of the screamer has grown over the years, drawing curiosity seekers and paranormal enthusiasts. While some dismiss it as local folklore, the consistency of the reports suggests something more than myth. Visitors often speak of a palpable tension, a canyon that feels alive and aware, responding to the living as if the spirit within is tracking each step. The screams, though terrifying, are only part of the experience. The oppressive atmosphere, the shifting shadows, and the sense of time stretching unnaturally all contribute to the haunting. The screamer serves as a grim reminder that even the most beautiful landscapes can harbor darkness. Taos Canyon, celebrated for its scenic beauty and history, is also a place of lingering anguish. The man who perished in despair left a mark not only on the land but on the very air, echoing through the canyon walls for decades. Those who hear the scream speak of it with a mix of awe and terror, an experience that lingers long after leaving the canyon. The spirit's presence, whether a manifestation of the past or something more sinister, remains a warning. Some sorrows never fade, and some cries never end. Deep in the rugged spine of the Organ Mountains, east of Las Cruces, New Mexico, There's a stretch of high desert pine that locals rarely speak of. It's not marked on maps, not visited by hikers, and certainly not mentioned after dark. They call it the widow's forest not because of the trees, but because of the silence that hangs beneath them, thick and heavy, like a held breath. In the early 1950s, a young woman named Elena Marquez lived in a small adobe house at the base of the Organs, near a dry wash where cottonwoods bent with the wind. A mechanic who fixed trucks for the mining crews up in Hanover. They married young, in the fading light of a Sunday afternoon at Our Lady of Guadalupe Church, and for 2 years, their life was simple, sun-baked, and full of promise. Then the Korean War came. Mateo was drafted in the winter of 1951. He left with a duffel bag and a photograph of Elena tucked into his breast pocket. She wrote to him every week, letters filled with news of the garden, the stray dog they'd taken in, the way the mountain shadows stretched long across the valley at dusk. He wrote back when he could, short notes, ink smudged, paper worn at the edges. His last letter arrived in March of 1953. It was barely a paragraph. The cold here is worse than anything I've known. I dream of the desert wind. I'll come home soon. But he never did. The official notice came in June. A single page, typed, cold. Mateo Marquez had been declared missing in action, presumed dead after a mortar strike near the 38th parallel. There was no body, no final word, just silence. Elena didn't cry at first. She folded the letter and placed it inside her husband's old toolbox, next to a wrench and a faded bandana. She went about her day tending the garden, feeding the dog, sweeping the porch, but the light in her eyes dimmed. Neighbors said she stopped humming while she worked. She began walking the foothills alone, following the dry creek bed up into the higher elevations, where the pines grew close and the rocks jutted like broken teeth. Weeks passed, then months. One morning in October, she left the house with a wool shawl around her shoulders and a canteen at her hip. She told no one where she was going. That night, she didn't return. Search parties combed the lower slopes, calling her name into the canyons. They found her footprints near a narrow trail that wound into a dense stand of ponderosis and juniper trees that grew twisted and close, as if protecting something. It was a place rarely visited, high on the eastern ridge, where the wind howled through the rock spires like a morning song. On the third day, a miner named Ruiz spotted something unnatural in the branches of an ancient juniper. Not an animal, not trash, a length of rope, frayed and weathered, dangling from a low-hanging limb, and beneath it, half buried in pine needles, a woman's boot. They found Elena hanging, her face turned skyward, her dark hair tangled in the wind. Her hands were folded over her chest, as if in prayer. Around her neck was a locket inside, the same photo Mateo had carried to war. She was buried beside her mother in the cemetery outside Masaya, beneath a plain stone that read, Elena Marquez, beloved wife, 1929 to 1953. No mention of how she died, no epitaph, just silence. But the forest remembered. After that, strange things began to happen. Hikers who wandered too far into that grove reported hearing soft weeping when no one was around. Others claimed to see a woman in a faded blue dress standing between the trees, her back turned, staring east toward Korea, toward the war, toward a horizon she could never cross. Some said the air grew cold in patches, even in summer. One man swore he found a fresh bouquet of desert marigolds, tied with twine, at the base of the same juniper where Elena was found, though no one had been seen near the area for weeks. Locals started calling it the widow's forest, not out of disrespect, but reverence. A place of sorrow, too deep for words. Older residents would cross themselves when passing the mountain's shadow at dusk. Children were warned not to play near the upper trails after sundown. Still, some are drawn to it. In the 1980s, a group of college students from NMSU camped there on a dare. They set up tents beneath the pines, lit a fire, and laughed at ghost stories. But by midnight, the fire died without explanation. Their flashlights flickered and failed. One girl woke screaming, saying a woman had sat beside her, whispering in Spanish. They packed up and fled before dawn. When they reviewed their photos later, one image showed a blurred figure standing behind a tree-long hair, hands clasped, face turned away. Another time, a park ranger claimed he found footprints leading deep into the forests, all barefoot, as if someone had walked there in the snow without shoes. But the prints vanished after 10 yards, as if the person had simply stopped walking. No one knows if Elena's spirit truly lingers there, or if grief itself has taken root in that lonely grove. But those who stood beneath those twisted pines say the same thing. The air feels different, heavier, like sorrow has soaked into the soil, into the bark, into the wind. The outskirts of White Sands, New Mexico, stretch far beyond the famous dunes, where sparse forests punctuate the otherwise stark landscape. During the day, these wooded patches seem unremarkable: gnarled mesquite trees, low scrub, and sandy soil that shifts with every step. Locals have long whispered of suicides that occurred in these isolated groves, tragedies that left their mark on the land in ways that cannot be measured. The forests are silent during the day, yet at night, they transform into a place where the line between reality and the supernatural seems to vanish. The most persistent legend involves the appearance of pale, flickering lights that glide between the trees. These orbs, described as ghostly lanterns or candles hovering above the sand, seem to float effortlessly, drifting through the underbrush or across open clearings. At first, they appear harmless, almost enchanting, and many who spot them assume they are emanating from a distant campsite or hikers moving along hidden trails. The lights are mesmerizing, their gentle glow beckoning travelers deeper into the forest, farther from the familiar paths. Those who have followed the lights often find themselves disoriented. What seems like a short walk suddenly stretches for miles, the terrain shifting in subtle, disorienting ways. The orbs never stay still long enough to catch up, always drifting just out of reach. Some report hearing faint laughter or soft murmurs accompanying the lights, voices that are human in tone but impossible to locate. Panic can set in quickly, as the isolation and growing darkness make it difficult to know which way to turn. Among the most terrifying accounts are those involving the sand itself. Survivors tell of skeletal hands erupting from the dunes, clawing at ankles and legs, grabbing with unnatural strength. The grip is cold and unyielding, as though the ground itself resents the intrusion of the living. Hikers and thrill-seekers who have encountered this phenomenon often speak of the sensation of being pulled toward the sand, their feet sinking slightly, as if the forest floor has become a trap. Struggling is exhausting. The lights themselves seem to have a sinister intelligence. Witnesses describe the orbs forming circles around them, moving closer with each step. The sensation is claustrophobic, as if the air itself is compressing. The circle tightens slowly, almost deliberately, creating a rising panic that can overwhelm the senses. Some who have faced this phenomenon report fainting or being paralyzed by fear, only to awaken disoriented on a familiar trail or even outside the forest entirely. Others claim that the lights vanish suddenly, leaving no trace, as though they never existed at all. Local folklore attributes these events to restless spirits of those who took their own lives in the area. The forests on the outskirts of White Sands were once quiet hideaways, places of contemplation or concealment. The lights are believed to be manifestations of grief and despair, appearing to lure the living into the same fates that claimed those who died there. The skeletal hands are said to be a physical manifestation of the land's memory, a warning or punishment for those who intrude without respect. Even those who enter the forest with experience or preparation find themselves unsettled. The sparse trees make navigation deceptively difficult, with shifting sand creating uneven footing and masking familiar landmarks. The lights can appear simultaneously near and far, breaking the sense of distance and time. Hikers report that compasses and GPS devices sometimes fail to function properly in these areas, adding to the disorientation. The combination of natural obstacles and supernatural interference makes the outskirts of White Sands uniquely treacherous after dark. Paranormal investigators and thrill-seekers are drawn to the site despite perhaps because of its reputation. Some have captured images of faint orbs hovering just above the dunes, their glow ethereal and difficult to explain. Night vision cameras pick up movement where no living creature should exist, while audio recordings sometimes reveal whispering voices or faint cries. Skeptics argue that the effects could be caused by natural gases, optical illusions, or the play of moonlight on sand. Yet the consistency of eyewitness reports over decades challenges purely rational explanations. For those who survive encounters with the phantom lights, the experience leaves a lasting impression. Many describe a deep, unshakable dread, as if part of the forest's sorrow has attached itself to them. Dreams of pale lanterns drifting through endless dunes, of hands emerging from the sand to clutch at their ankles, persist long after the event. Friends and family often notice changes in demeanor, an acute anxiety, a hesitation to enter open spaces, or a nervous glance at shadows where none should exist. The legend, it seems, is not only a warning for the uninitiated, but a burden carried by those who have glimpsed the otherworldly truth of the forest. Despite its dangers, the outskirts of White Sands remain a place of fascination. Adventure seekers come to explore the dunes by day and the forests by night, compelled by the thrill of the unknown. Ghost hunters and paranormal enthusiasts visit with cameras and recording devices, eager to document what many believe cannot be fully explained. Yet every visitor is reminded to respect the forest, to heed the warnings of those who have felt the phantom lights close in. The forest is patient, silent in the daytime, but alive in the darkness, its sorrow ever present, its warnings etched into the sand. The legend of the phantom lights endures because of the experiences of those who have encountered them. The pale orbs continue to drift between trees, elusive and mesmerizing, drawing travelers deeper into the heart of the forest. The skeletal hands remain a terrifying reminder that the earth itself can remember the tragedies it has witnessed. And the circle of lights that tightens around the living serves as a haunting metaphor for grief as unrelenting hold. For those who wander too far, too late, the outskirts of White Sands are a place where the boundary between life and death, the natural and the supernatural, dissolves entirely. Along the Rio Grande, near Albuquerque, the bosque stretches as a narrow ribbon of green, a rich contrast to the surrounding desert. Towering cottonwoods and dense willows create a shaded sanctuary where joggers, cyclists, and birdwatchers often come to escape the heat of the day. The gentle rustle of leaves and the murmuring flow of the river make the bosque appear peaceful, even inviting. Yet, beneath this serene canopy, the forest conceals a darkness that has persisted for decades. Locals whisper of the drowned man, a spirit tethered to the riverbank, whose story is soaked in tragedy and sorrow. The tale begins many years ago. A man, burdened by despair, walked the banks of the Rio Grande one summer evening, carrying the weight of a life that felt unbearable. Friends and neighbors recall a quiet man, contemplative and often withdrawn, who struggled with isolation and the subtle ache of loss. On that day, he entered the water, moving silently into the river's edge, and never returned. His body was eventually recovered, but stories say that something lingered long after the river had claimed him. The drowned man, they say, refused to leave the bosque, bound by grief and by the finality of his own choice. Those who frequent the bosque recount encounters that defy explanation. Joggers in the early morning often speak of seeing a figure moving between the trees, soaked to the skin, his hair plastered against his face and clothes clinging as if he had just emerged from the river. Cyclists have reported the sudden sensation of someone pacing alongside them, only to glance over and find the path empty. The figure leaves behind muddy footprints, impressions in the soft soil of the riverbank that vanish inexplicably after a few steps. It is as though the earth itself refuses to hold him, yet the ghost continues to wander, a restless presence within the trees. The drowned man's appearance is both unsettling and subtle. His clothes are always dripping wet, his movements slow and deliberate, his expression hidden in shadows cast by the dense canopy. Sometimes his eyes are glimpsed for a moment, deep pools reflecting a sorrow that is palpable. Witnesses describe a sudden chill in the air, the sensation of moisture rising from the ground, and an oppressive quiet that falls over the area. Birds stop singing, and the usual sounds of wildlife seem muted, as if the forest itself holds its breath in recognition of his presence. Many have reported auditory phenomena as well. Joggers say they hear splashing in the shallow river where no current exists, soft whispers carried on the wind, or the faint echo of footsteps moving parallel to their own. Those who experience these sounds often find their pace quickening, hearts racing, driven by a sense that they are being observed by something that cannot be seen. The footprints left by the drowned man have become one of the most chilling aspects of his legend. They appear as though he has walked normally along a trail, but the impressions are shallow, often disappearing entirely after a few paces. Some suggest that these fleeting marks are a sign that his spirit is trapped between worlds, unable to fully leave the physical plane. Others believe the footprints are a warning, a subtle reminder of the river's danger and of the fragility of life itself. Hikers who follow them, hoping to understand the phenomenon, often become disoriented, losing their sense of direction among the winding trails and dense undergrowth. There are accounts of more intimate encounters, too. Cyclists have reported brushes against their shoulders, a damp hand that vanishes before it can be seen. Joggers sometimes feel a pressure at the small of their back, as if being guided or perhaps urged away from the riverbank. The drowned man does not appear violent. His presence is sorrowful, heavy with melancholy, yet it is impossible to ignore. Many who encounter him describe an overwhelming empathy, a wave of grief that seems to seep into the bones, leaving them shaken long after they have left the forest. Paranormal enthusiasts and ghost hunters have visited the bosque over the years, drawn by the drowned man's legend. Some have captured fleeting figures on camera, wet shapes drifting silently among the trees. Audio recordings occasionally reveal soft splashing sounds or whispered words, too indistinct to interpret clearly, but enough to convince investigators that something otherworldly remains tethered to the river. Skeptics argue that timidity, reflections on the water, and natural sounds of wildlife explain the phenomena. Yet the consistency of sightings over decades lends credibility to the stories, at least in the eyes of those who have experienced them. The drowned man has become a fixture of local lore, a cautionary tale, and a symbol of grief that refuses to fade. Parents warn children to remain on well-trodden paths. Hikers are advised to travel in groups, and joggers sometimes share stories of their own encounters, a silent acknowledgement that the bosque is not entirely as it seems. Even in daylight, there is a subtle unease, a lingering sense that someone or something is watching from among the trees, waiting along the riverbank, tethered to the water that claimed his life. Visitors who leave the bosque often carry the memory of their encounter. Some recall the fleeting glimpse of wet footprints vanishing behind them, the sudden chill or the quiet sorrow in the air. Dreams of the river and its shaded paths, of a man wandering endlessly through the trees, are common among those who have walked the trails at night. The legend continues to grow, fueled not only by the tragic history of the man who drowned, but by the experiences of those who have felt the weight of his presence. Galenas Canyon, tucked into the rugged hills of New Mexico, is a place of stark beauty by day. Sunlight bathes the rocky outcrops and desert scrub, and the canyon walls glow in hues of red and gold. But when night falls, a different world emerges. Locals speak in hushed tones of a strange phenomenon that occurs after dark, a path lined with ghostly candles, flickering with an otherworldly light, known as the Candle Path. It is said to trace the final steps of a woman who, consumed by grief and despair, led her children into the woods before ending her own life. The story dates back decades. The woman, overwhelmed by circumstances no longer remembered in detail, walked into Galenas Canyon with her young children. Those who knew her describe a gentle, caring mother who was suddenly overcome by a sadness too heavy to bear. In the shadowed folds of the canyon, she took her own life, leaving her children behind, so the legends suggest. Some say the children vanished with her. Others believe they linger still, trapped between worlds, their cries carried on the wind through the canyon. Tonight, like many before, The candle path emerges when darkness falls. Small lights appear along the trail, their glow pale and wavering, like lanterns held by unseen hands. They seem to float above the ground, illuminating the path in a gentle, eerie rhythm. Those who see the candles often feel a compulsion to follow them, as if the lights themselves are guiding the traveler deeper into the canyon's shadowed heart. The trail is never long or straight. It twists through juniper groves, around boulders, and along the edges of sandy washes. Each candle's flame seems to flicker in response to the observer, brightening when approached, then dimming as if drawing them onward. The experience of following the candle path is unsettling. The air grows colder as one progresses, and the usual desert sounds, crickets, distant coyotes, the whisper of wind, fade into an almost complete silence. Travelers often report hearing faint sobbing or the soft cries of children carried on the night air. Sometimes the sound seems near, other times impossibly distant, yet always clear enough to stir a primal unease. The cries are never harsh or angry. They are mournful, plaintive, and hauntingly innocent. Many who have walked the path recount sensations that defy rational explanation. Small, cold hands have been felt brushing against arms or tugging gently at clothing. Some insist these are the spirits of the children, playful yet sorrowful, trying to make contact with the living. The hands are fleeting, barely tangible, leaving no marks. Yet the chill lingers, creeping down the spine and settling into the bones. Those who pause often report a profound sense of sadness, a weight that seems to press upon the chest, as if the canyon itself mourns alongside the lost souls it holds. The candles guide travelers to a destination that is always the same. The final flame rests beneath a lone, gnarled tree at the canyon's edge. There, the air feels heavier, and the shadows stretch unnaturally across the ground. A rope noose swings gently from a sturdy branch, moving as though stirred by an invisible hand. It is here that the story of the mother is most vividly remembered, the culmination of despair, the place where grief consumed her completely. Those who approach the tree often feel a pull, a silent urging to witness the tragedy that unfolded here, though many turn away before they can look directly beneath the canopy. The phenomenon of the candle path is not just a tale for children or the credulous. Many serious hikers, campers, and nocturnal explorers have reported seeing the candles themselves. Cameras set up along the canyon have captured flickers of light where no physical source exists. Audio recordings occasionally reveal soft crying, tiny footsteps, or whispers that vanish upon playback. Skeptics suggest bioluminescent fungi, reflections of distant lights, or even optical illusions caused by mist and shadows. Yet the consistency of the accounts and the emotional weight described by witnesses suggests something far more profound and unsettling than mere coincidence. Locals warn against following the candles too far. The path is said to be treacherous, with loose rocks, sudden drop-offs, and the potential to become hopelessly lost. More than once, hikers have reported wandering for hours, unsure of how they arrived or how to return to familiar trails. Even those who turn back often carry an aftertaste of unease, the echo of children's cries, the brush of invisible hands, and the haunting image of the noose swaying in the wind. The candle path endures as a spectral guide through grief and memory, a haunting reminder of human sorrow left behind. It is a trail marked not on maps but in stories, passed down in quiet warnings and whispered recountings around campfires. Those who encounter it rarely forget the experience, the soft illumination of ghostly flames, the tug of unseen hands, and the sorrowful cries that echo through the canyon. Some speak of a strange empathy that settles over them, a deep connection to the mother's despair and the children she led into the woods. For those brave enough, or perhaps unlucky enough, to follow the candle path to its end, the gnarled tree and the swaying noose serve as a stark reminder of life's fragility and the lingering power of grief. The candles are more than lights. They are markers of a story that refuses to fade, of sorrow etched into the land itself. Even after leaving the canyon, travelers report dreams of the flickering flames, of small hands reaching out from the darkness, and the sound of crying that seems to come from nowhere, yet everywhere. On the edge of blue water state forests, where the red dirt trails fade into tall grass and the wind never seems to rest, stands a lone cottonwood tree. It rises from the earth like a sentinel, gnarled and ancient, its bark split with time, its limbs twisted as if frozen mid-scream. Locals call it the singing tree. And if you walk close enough, when the wind stirs, you'll hear it, a low, mournful moan that curls through the air like a voice too broken to cry. It doesn't sound like wood creaking or branches clashing. No, this is different. It's a tone that slips under your skin, soft at first, a hum, almost musical, then swelling into something deeper, more human, a groan, a lament. Some say it sounds like a man weeping. Others swear it's singing, a tune, without words, heavy with grief. And if you stand beneath its canopy when the breeze picks up, they say the sound grows louder, clearer, as though the tree is leaning down to speak directly into your ear. The story goes back nearly a century. A man named Elias Travers, a logger who worked the blue water timber in the 1930s, lived alone in a cabin near the forest's edge. Quiet, some said. Haunted, others whispered. He kept to himself, only coming into town for supplies, always at dawn when the streets were empty. He didn't drink, didn't gamble, but he carried a sadness, like a coat, too heavy to ever take off. No one knows exactly what happened to him. Some say he lost his wife to fever and never recovered. Others claim he was run out of another town for a crime he didn't commit. What's certain is that one morning in late October, hunters found his body hanging from the largest cottonwood in the forest, the only one of its kind for miles. The rope was tied tight around a thick, low-hanging branch. His boots dangled just above the dry earth, and his face, turned skyward, was calm, almost peaceful. They cut him down, buried him in an unmarked grave outside the town cemetery, closed the file. But the people of Blue Water never forgot, and within weeks, the stories began. First, it was just the wind. Ranchers passing by on horseback said they heard crying in the trees. Then, a boy chasing cattle swore he heard someone call his name, softly, like a parent calling a child home. He ran, and when he told his father, the man went pale and forbade him from ever going near that tree again. Over the years, the legend grew. Travelers would stop their cars along the dirt road leading into the forest, roll down their windows, and listen. On still days, nothing. But when the wind came, especially in the late afternoon, when shadows stretched long across the ground, the tree would sing, not a happy song, never that. It was sorrow-given sound, a slow wavering note that rose and fell like breath. Some visitors recorded it, hoping to prove it was just the wind moving through cracked wood or hollow limbs. But every recording came back the same, layered, almost harmonic, like a chorus of one, and in a few, barely audible beneath the moan, were whispers, faint, indistinct, but unmistakably shaped like words. One woman, a botanist studying forest acoustics, camped near the tree for 3 nights. She set up microphones, motion sensors, even a thermal camera. On the second night, her equipment captured something strange. As the wind picked up, the lowest branch began to vibrate at a frequency close to human vocal range. But that wasn't the odd part. The sound didn't match the movement. The branch swayed slowly, gently, but the moan that came from it surged, as if pushed by something inside. The detailed mountains rise abruptly from the high desert of New Mexico, their rugged peaks and rolling foothills forming a remote and often desolate landscape. Amid these jagged ridges lies a campsite known to locals as the Hollow Camp, a site long avoided by anyone who values their peace of mind. By day, the area seems unremarkable. A few flat clearings among pinyon and juniper trees, rocks scattered across sandy soil, and the faint scent of sagebrush carried on the wind. But by night, Hollow Camp transforms into a place of unsettling whispers and spectral echoes, a location where the veil between the living and the lost is said to be thin. The legends surrounding Hollow Camp are numerous, though none are comforting. Generations of hikers, campers, and wanderers have passed down stories of strange occurrences daily, of voices drifting across the hills, of laughter that turns to wails, and of inexplicable feelings of dread that descend suddenly as the sun sets. Locals warn that only the bold or the foolish venture here after dark, for the forested slopes and shadowed valleys seem to harbor a presence both unseen and insistent. The first signs of the camp's haunting are subtle, faint as if carried from a nearby valley. Laughter and chatter fill the air, soft and casual, like campers sitting around a fire far away. At first, it seems benign, even comforting, giving the impression that the mountains are not empty, and that human life thrives in hidden corners. Many who hear these sounds initially assume they have stumbled upon another group of campers or hikers, though there is never anyone to be seen when they search. As night deepens, the sounds shift. The cheerful voices fade, replaced by sobs and murmured pleas. The laughter grows hollow, warped, and the chatter takes on a tone of desperation. Hikers who have stayed until twilight describe the change as sudden, almost imperceptible at first, and then impossible to ignore. Footsteps that were once soft on the forest floor seem to echo where no one walks. Shadows lengthen unnaturally among the juniper and pinyon trees, and a chill creeps through the air, regardless of the daytime warmth. By midnight, the haunting reaches its peak. The sobs become anguished screams, tearing through the stillness of the mountains, like the cries of the lost. Some campers report hearing frantic shouts pleading for help, voices overlapping in a cacophony of despair. The wind itself seems to carry these cries, sweeping them down valleys and across the ridges, giving the impression that the mountains themselves are alive with suffering. Even those who try to block out the sounds feel them pressing into the mind, relentless and oppressive. Many visitors have described strange phenomena that accompanied the voices. Tents collapse for no reason, fires extinguish suddenly, and gear is found scattered across the ground as if moved by invisible hands. Shadows flicker at the edges of vision, and reflections in the eyes of companions sometimes reveal figures that vanish when looked at directly. Some hikers claim to see outlines of people standing silently on ridges or in clearings, their shapes indistinct but undeniably human, staring back before melting into the darkness. Those who have spent the night at Hollow Camp often speak of a weight on the chest, an oppressive heaviness that grows as the hours pass. Sleep is nearly impossible, as the voices continue without pause, growing louder and more urgent. Many wake from nightmares of being trapped in narrow canyons, of hands reaching from the darkness, or of running endlessly through the forest while pursued by unseen figures. Even when morning arrives and the voices fade, the memory lingers, leaving visitors shaken and wary. Researchers and paranormal enthusiasts occasionally attempt to document the Hollow Camp phenomenon. Audio recordings sometimes pick up distorted voices, faint at first but rising into unearthly wails when played back. Cameras set up overnight occasionally capture shadowy forms moving through the trees or along ridge lines. Skeptics suggest wind patterns, echoes, and natural wildlife could create some of these effects. Yet the uniformity of reports from hikers over decades challenges purely rational explanations. Those who experience it firsthand describe an intensity that cannot be dismissed as mere coincidence. Locals warn that Hollow Camp is not a place for the faint of heart. Even experienced campers are advised to avoid staying overnight, for the voices can affect perception, disorient travelers, and lead them far from established trails. Some hikers report finding themselves hopelessly lost, even after following familiar paths, with the screams of the mountain echoing as they stumble through the dark. A few have told stories of leaving the area at first light, only to glance back and see figures standing where no one should have been, watching silently until they disappear into the ridges. The origin of the haunting remains a matter of speculation. Some say the voices are the echoes of past tragedies, people who perished in the mountains long ago, hunters, wanderers, or lost families whose grief and fear became entwined with the land. Others believe Hollow Camp serves as a focal point for lingering spirits, a nexus where sorrow collects and manifests as the sounds and shadows that unnerve the living, regardless of the cause. Those who enter the campsite are aware of its history, the warnings passed down by locals, and the stories carried in hushed tones about the mountain's restless voices. Despite or perhaps because of its fearsome reputation, Hollow Camp draws the brave and the curious. Ghost hunters, thrill seekers, and riders seeking inspiration venture into the Detail Mountains to witness the phenomenon for themselves. Many leave with nothing tangible to show for their efforts. Yet their accounts echo the same experiences. Laughter that turns to tears, the sensation of unseen eyes watching, the chilling screams of midnight that seem to rise from the hills themselves. For those who dare to stay, the campsite is a reminder of the thin line between the living and the lost. A place where the forest and the mountains carry the sorrow of those who can no longer speak for themselves. The Detail Mountains remain beautiful and rugged by day, but Hollow Camp is a cautionary place, a locus of grief and unrest hidden in plain sight. The voices that drift across the hills, shifting from laughter to sobs to screaming, serve as a haunting testament to the mysteries of the forest and the enduring power of sorrow, filling the mountains with a presence that is both invisible and impossible to ignore. L, meaning the Badlands, stretches across New Mexico as a harsh and unforgiving landscape. Its terrain is jagged and volcanic, a maze of blackened lava flows, jagged rocks, and fissures that seem to descend into the earth itself. Despite its desolation, small groves of twisted, stunted trees manage to survive among the hardened flows, their roots gripping the volcanic soil as if clinging to life by sheer will. Among these isolated patches of vegetation lies a grove known locally as the Ash Woods, a place that carries a reputation far darker than its stark beauty suggests. The Ash Woods is a twisted forest, small yet dense, where gnarled junipers and stunted pinnons grow amidst ash-colored soil and blackened lava fragments. Even in daylight, the grove feels heavy, suffused with a sense of unease that is difficult to describe. The wind seems to move differently here, carrying a subtle sulfurous scent that hints at the volcanic earth beneath. Hikers and explorers who venture into the woods alone often report an oppressive atmosphere, a weight on the chest, and the feeling that they are being observed by unseen eyes. Legends surrounding the Ashwoods speak of travelers who entered the grove alone and never returned. Those who survive recount encounters that are chilling in both sensation and imagery. Many describe a sudden choking sensation, as if invisible smoke has filled their lungs. The air carries a stench of burning flesh, acrid and sharp, clinging to the senses and refusing to dissipate. Some describe coughing and gagging as they try to move through the forest. The smoke invisible but undeniably real, filling the grove like a spectral fire that has no source. The figures in the Ashwoods are equally terrifying. Survivors speak of blackened shapes lurking among the twisted trees, humanoid in form but distorted, their outlines blurred as if shrouded in smoke or shadow. They do not move in the way living beings do. Their motions are jerky, unnatural, and when caught in the corner of the eye, they vanish only to reappear elsewhere. Those who confront the figures directly often find them receding into the gloom, their presence lingering even when unseen. The feeling of being watched is constant, an unrelenting gaze that gnaws at the mind and heart. Sound in the Ashwoods is equally disorienting. The wind carries whispers, faint voices that seem to come from no specific direction. Some hikers hear distant screams or low moans, others catch the soft rustle of movement just beyond the reach of vision. Occasionally, the grove seems to amplify natural sounds, turning a bird's call or the snap of a branch into something distorted and ghostly. Travelers describe the sensation of the grove closing in around them. Paths that seemed clear moments ago twisting inexplicably, leading them deeper into the labyrinth of ash and trees. Those who attempt to navigate the Ashwoods often report a sensation of time distortion. Minutes stretch into hours. Familiar landmarks shift or vanish entirely. Some hikers who survive speak of wandering in circles, returning to the same blackened tree repeatedly despite taking different paths. The forest seems alive in these moments, almost sentient, guiding or trapping those who intrude. Panic can set in quickly, compounded by the choking air, the smell of burning flesh, and the presence of the shadowy figures. leaving even experienced hikers disoriented and terrified. Paranormal investigators have visited the ash woods, drawn by its reputation. Cameras sometimes capture fleeting, dark shapes moving between the trees, while audio recordings occasionally reveal faint whispers or moans that vanish when played back. Many investigators note the same hallmarks reported by casual hikers: sudden temperature drops, feelings of being watched, and a pervasive sense of dread. Skeptics propose hallucinations caused by isolation, the mind filling in gaps amid the oppressive atmosphere. But the consistency of reports from multiple witnesses across decades challenges purely rational explanations. The Ashwoods has earned a cautionary reputation among locals. Residents warn against entering alone, especially at dusk or after dark, when the grove's oppressive qualities are said to intensify. Even small groups report feeling the grove's weight, though isolation seems to magnify the phenomena. Campers and hikers are advised to stay near the edge of the lava fields, to respect the twisted trees, and to avoid lingering, for the forest appears to feed on curiosity and solitude. Stories of the ash woods are passed along in whispers, a combination of legend and warning. Those who survive encounters often carry vivid memories: the choking phantom smoke, the acrid smell of burning flesh, the blackened figures shifting among the trees, and the disorienting labyrinth of ash and volcanic rock. Dreams of the grove are common, recurring for weeks or months afterward, replaying the sensations of dread and the unnerving presence of the unseen watchers. For some, the experience leaves a lasting mark, a wariness of isolated forests and a cautious respect for the darker corners of the natural world. Despite its dangers, the Ashwoods draws the bold and the curious, those compelled to confront the unknown. Photographers, hikers, and paranormal enthusiasts venture into the grove, seeking evidence or simply to experience the fear firsthand. Many leave without incident, though most report an emotional weight, an unshakable feeling that the forest is not empty, that the twisted trees harbor secrets beyond comprehension. For those who linger too long or wander too far, the Ashwoods has claimed more than time or courage. It has ensnared the unwary, leaving them lost, frightened, and sometimes never seen again. El itself is a landscape of extremes, a volcanic wilderness of stark beauty and harsh terrain. Yet within this harshness, the Ashwood stands apart, a pocket of darkness where the ordinary laws of nature seem to bend. The smoke, the figures, the choking air, and the smell of fire linger as warnings to anyone who dares enter alone. The forest is patient, waiting quietly for the next traveler to wander among the twisted trees. A place where curiosity can become obsession and solitude becomes peril. The Capitan Mountains rise sharply from the plains of central New Mexico, a rugged chain of peaks and valleys where the wind carries both the scent of pine and the weight of history. By day, the mountains are serene, their slopes dotted with juniper and oak, with rocky outcrops that catch the sunlight in golden glints. But as dusk falls, the forests and canyons seem to take on a life of their own, and stories told in whispers among locals speak of a figure known as the Silent Rider. The Silent Rider is said to appear along remote trails, moving slowly and deliberately between the trees. Witnesses describe a man mounted on a horse, his posture rigid, his gaze fixed straight ahead. The figure wears a wide-brimmed hat that casts his face in deep shadow, concealing any hint of expression. There is an unnatural stillness to him, a quiet aura that separates him from the living world. His horse is unlike any other, skeletal in appearance, its bones faintly visible beneath a coat of pale, ghostly flesh. The animal moves silently, its hooves making no sound on the dirt or rocky ground. Legend holds that the rider was once a rancher who had lost everything: his land, his livestock, and his family. Consumed by despair, he rode deep into the mountains one evening and ended his life. Some say his grief was so profound that it tethered him to the earth. And now he wanders the forested trails, a restless spirit forever bound to the path of his final ride. The horse, too, is said to have died that night, yet it remains with him, a skeletal companion in a spectral world, tracing the trail that led them both to oblivion. Those who have encountered the silent rider describe an overwhelming sense of stillness, as though the air itself has thickened in his presence. Travelers often notice him from a distance first, glimpsing the shape of the horse and rider moving slowly through the trees. The figure never turns or acknowledges observers, yet the feeling of being watched is palpable. Even when unseen, his presence is suggested in the way shadows stretch unnaturally, in the sudden silence that seems to fall over birds and wildlife, and in the deep, oppressive calm that settles over the forest. Approaching the rider is an entirely different experience. Several witnesses recount stepping forward to confront him, only to find the figure vanish before their eyes. One moment the rider is there, outlined against the dusky forest. The next, he is gone, leaving behind only the eerie silence of the mountains. Yet the traces of his passage remain unmistakable. The horse's tracks appear in the dirt, elongated and faintly glowing, as if smoldering in the earth itself. The footprints mark a path through the forest that seems impossible, leading across rocky inclines and through thick undergrowth with no clear direction. A trail that defies natural explanation. The phenomenon is not limited to a single sighting. Locals recount multiple encounters, often describing the rider appearing at the same location on different nights. Hikers have reported seeing the horse emerge from the shadows of one canyon only to vanish entirely in the next. Some travelers claim that the air around the tracks is warmer than the surrounding ground, a subtle heat that fades over time, adding to the unnatural aura of the rider's presence. The combination of silent movement, shadowed face, and smoldering tracks creates an image that lingers in memory long after the encounter has ended. Auditory experiences accompany the sightings, though rarely. The silent rider's horse is said to make no sound, yet some have reported faint creaks or the soft jingle of a spectral saddle. Others have described whispers carried on the wind, voices indistinct but mournful, almost as if the mountains themselves are speaking of loss and regret. The wind seems to bend around the figure, amplifying the sense of isolation and unease, making every rustle of leaves and snap of a twig feel laden with meaning. Investigators of the paranormal have visited the Capitan Mountains to document the silent rider. Cameras and audio recorders occasionally pick up anomalies, blurred figures moving through the trees, shadows that shift in ways the natural light cannot account for, and faint traces of warmth or electromagnetic readings around the tracks. Skeptics argue that the sightings are products of imagination or misidentification, but the consistency of reports over decades challenges purely rational explanations. Each account emphasizes the same features: the skeletal horse, the shadowed rider, the silent approach, and the smoldering tracks that remain when the rider disappears. The rider has become a symbol of grief and unresolved despair in local lore. His figure is invoked in warnings to travelers to stay on established trails and to respect the mountains, not just for their physical dangers, but for the mysteries they hold. Many hikers leave offerings at the trailhead or pause to acknowledge the story, as if small acts of respect might ease the sorrow that binds him to the forest. Some claim that the figure never appears to those who trespass with ill intent, that the silent rider judges the living with a quiet, spectral gaze, indifferent to curiosity, but keenly aware of disrespect. Despite the fear he inspires, the silent rider continues to draw those curious about the supernatural. Witnesses often describe a profound impact on their perception of the forest, a heightened awareness of silence, shadow, and movement. Nights in the Capitan Mountains carry the weight of history and sorrow, made tangible in the figure of the rider and his horse. The image of the skeletal mount, gliding silently over smoldering tracks, remains imprinted on the minds of all who see him, a haunting reminder that some losses linger far longer than life itself. Hondo Valley, nestled in the rolling hills of central New Mexico, is a landscape of serene beauty by day. Grassy meadows stretch between low mountains, and streams wind quietly through the valley floor. Yet among the tranquil scenery lies a place whispered about in local legend: the White Horse Clearing. Here, the natural calm of the valley gives way to something far more mysterious, a ghostly presence that has been seen by travelers for decades. The White Horse Clearing is a small expanse of open land surrounded by dense forest, where sunlight filters through the trees in dappled patterns. In the quiet of the evening, the clearing seems stiller than the surrounding forest, the air heavy and strangely charged. Locals tell stories of a pale horse that appears in this spot, a spectral animal whose presence carries both awe and fear. The horse is said to be riderless, yet it is linked to a tragic history. Witnesses who have seen the horse describe it as pale, almost glowing in the dim light of dusk or moonlight. Its coat seems too bright to be natural, and its movements are unnervingly silent. Even on soft grass or dry leaves, the hooves make no sound, and the animal glides across the clearing with an otherworldly grace. Travelers often notice the horse standing alone in the center of the clearing, motionless, its head slightly bowed, eyes glowing faintly, with a light that is neither warm nor threatening, but intensely aware. Encounters with the horse begin subtly. Some hikers and campers report first glimpsing a pale shape among the trees, a momentary flicker of white that disappears when they blink. Others see the animal clearly, frozen in place, as if observing them. Despite its stillness, there is a sensation of being watched, a quiet pressure that raises the hairs on the back of the neck. Those who pause often feel an emotional weight, a mixture of sorrow and longing that seems to radiate from the horse. Approaching the horse is an exercise in futility. Most who step toward it find the creature vanishing in an instant, bolting silently into the surrounding trees. The horse does not run in a panicked manner. Its movements are deliberate, graceful, and almost calculated, disappearing as quickly as it appeared. Yet even when the animal is gone, its presence lingers. The ground may bear the faint outline of hooves, impressions that vanish within minutes, and the air often retains a chill, as if the clearing itself remembers the encounter. The legend of the White Horse Clearing is rooted in tragedy. Stories tell of a man who lost everything he held dear: moly, livestock, perhaps even hope, and hanged himself near the clearing's edge. Some say the horse was his companion, loyal until the very end, and that the spirit of the animal continues to roam the land, bound to the place where grief and love intertwined. The glowing eyes of the horse are said to be the remnants of that bond, a quiet testimony to a life ended too soon. Those who witness the horse often report unusual sensory experiences. Some describe a faint scent of hay or leather, as though the animal's harness were still present, though no physical traces remain. Others hear a soft rustle of hooves on leaves, just beyond the edge of hearing. The clearing is quiet in an unnatural way, the usual sounds of wind, birds, and insects seeming muted when the horse appears. Some hikers even speak of a tugging feeling at the heart or a sudden tightness in the chest, as if the sorrow carried by the animal manifests physically. The White Horse Clearing has drawn the curiosity of both locals and paranormal enthusiasts. Photographs sometimes capture a pale blur, but rarely is the horse fully visible on camera. Audio recordings occasionally pick up faint noises, soft rustling, or distant whiness that cannot be explained by natural causes. Skeptics argue that imagination and expectations play a role, but the consistency of reports over decades makes the story compelling. Each encounter emphasizes the same qualities: the glowing eyes, the pale coat, the silent presence, and the instantaneous disappearance when approached. The clearing has become a cautionary tale for visitors to Hondo Valley. Locals warn against wandering into the grove alone at dusk or night, emphasizing that the horse is not malevolent, but should be respected. It is a reminder of loss, loyalty, and the mysteries that linger at the edges of the familiar world. Those who encounter it rarely forget the experience, describing dreams of the glowing eyes, the silent stand of the horse, and the way it vanishes without a trace, leaving a haunting impression in memory. Some claim that the horse appears more frequently during times of personal grief, as if drawn to those who carry sorrow themselves, replaying the final moments of loyalty and loss for anyone who steps into the clearing. Regardless of the cause, the White Horse remains a spectral presence, a bridge between the world of the living and the lingering shadows of the past. The San Mateo Mountains of New Mexico rise abruptly from the surrounding desert plains, a rugged expanse of jagged peaks, dense forests, and quiet valleys. By day, the mountains are strikingly beautiful, with their slopes cloaked in pine and oak, and streams winding through shaded canyons. Yet, beneath the natural beauty lies a lingering sorrow, a place where the grief of the past seems to have settled permanently. Hikers and locals speak in hushed tones of a ghostly figure known as the Weeping Soldier, a presence tied to tragedy and loss from decades ago. The legend tells of a young man who returned from the battlefields of World War II forever changed. He survived the war, but the horrors he witnessed left him broken, unable to reintegrate into the life he once knew. Friends and family watched helplessly as he withdrew into himself, spending hours wandering the forests and canyons of the San Mateo Mountains. Ultimately, overcome by despair, he ended his life beneath the trees, seeking a quiet place to escape the weight of memory and regret. Some say his soul never found peace, tethered to the mountains by the trauma and sorrow of his life and death. Hikers who ventured deep into the forested trails of the San Mateo Mountains sometimes report a strange sight: a man in a faded military uniform, seated or standing beneath the trees, shoulders slumped in sorrow. He often appears in clearings or along quiet paths where the sunlight barely touches the ground. Witnesses describe the figure as holding his head in his hands, weeping in a way that seems endless, his sobs echoing faintly through the trees. The sound is mournful, carrying the weight of grief across the forest, and it strikes those who hear it with a deep, unshakable sadness. The Weeping Soldier is not aggressive or threatening, yet his presence is profoundly unsettling. Even from a distance, hikers report a sense of sorrow pressing against them, as though the man's despair has infused the very air. The cries seem to reach into the mind, stirring emotions that are not entirely one's own. Some hikers speak of a heaviness in the chest, sudden fatigue, or an overwhelming urge to turn back when approaching the area where the soldier appears. There is a palpable energy around him, a reminder that grief can linger long after life has ended. If approached, the encounter becomes even more surreal and terrifying. Witnesses describe the soldier lifting his head from his hands, revealing eyes that are hollow sockets, empty and dark, yet somehow aware. His gaze is not directed in anger or malice, but it pierces through to the very core, a chilling reflection of his anguish. At that moment, the figure vanishes, leaving only the rustling of leaves and the quiet murmur of the forest. No footsteps remain, no trace of the uniform, only the memory of the encounter and the echo of his cries. Some hikers report feeling a sudden drop in temperature, or the subtle brush of air against their skin, as if the soldier had passed through them in a fleeting, spectral form. The phenomenon has been observed repeatedly over decades. Locals tell stories of hikers who encountered the soldier and were so unnerved that they left the mountains immediately. Others report seeing him multiple times, sometimes along the same trail, sometimes in different clearings. Audio recordings occasionally capture faint sobs or whispers, though attempts to capture visual evidence are often inconclusive. Cameras and video devices may record fleeting shapes or blurs, but the soldier himself rarely appears clearly in photographs. The consistency of witness reports suggests a presence tied intimately to the forest and the mountains, a manifestation of grief that defies easy explanation. Those who spend time near the soldier often speak of other strange experiences. Some report hearing distant footsteps or the soft click of dog tags, though the forest is empty. Others describe shadows moving just beyond the edge of vision, or the sense of being observed even when the figure is gone. Travelers sometimes leave small tokens along the trail stones, flowers, or coins as gestures of respect, a way to acknowledge the soldier's pain and offer a small act of connection to a soul who remains tethered to the living world. The Weeping Soldier has become a somber emblem of the lingering cost of war, a reminder that the battles fought on the battlefield often continue long after returning home. His figure embodies sorrow and loss, not as a ghost seeking vengeance, but as a spirit bound by the weight of human experience and memory. Those who encounter him rarely forget the experience, carrying the image of the uniform, the slumped shoulders, and the hollow eyes in their minds for years afterward. The San Mateo Mountains, beautiful and tranquil in daylight, transform into a place of reflection and unease after dusk. The presence of the weeping soldier imbues the forest with a sense of history, sorrow, and respect. Visitors who see him experience more than fear. They feel a profound connection to the struggles of those who lived, suffered, and died long ago. The rustling of leaves and the soft echo of sobs in the forest become a reminder of the fragility of life and the enduring impact of trauma. The Guadalupe Mountains stretch across western Texas and southeastern New Mexico, their jagged peaks rising sharply from the surrounding desert plains. By day, the range is a landscape of rugged butte-rocky cliffs, narrow canyons, and forests of juniper and pine. Yet, as the sun dips toward the horizon, the mountains seem to shift in character. Trails that appeared tranquil by daylight take on a more ominous aspect. Shadows stretch unnaturally, and the wind carries whispers that have no discernible source. Among the legends that haunt these trails is one of the Black Rider, a spectral horseman whose presence is both eerie and mesmerizing. The story of the Black Rider is tied to the lore of the Old West. Some say he was once a notorious gunfighter, a man skilled with a weapon and feared by those who knew him. His life ended violently in the Guadalupe Range. Though accounts vary, some claim he was betrayed by a rival. Others suggest he was ambushed while attempting to flee the law. Whatever the truth, his death was sudden, leaving behind a figure that would never rest. Legend has it that the man's spirit took the form of a rider on a black horse, patrolling the trails where his mortal life came to an end. Those who encounter the Black Rider describe a figure that seems simultaneously real and unreal. At dusk, travelers often report seeing a dark shape emerging from the shadows, a horse and rider moving with deliberate grace along narrow trails or through canyons. The horse is described as coal-black, its coat absorbing the last light of the setting sun. The rider's form is cloaked, face hidden beneath a hood that casts his features in shadow. He sits upright and still, exuding an aura of authority and quiet menace, a ghostly echo of the life he once led. One of the most unsettling aspects of encountering the Black Rider is his apparent awareness. Witnesses describe a moment when the rider raises a hand, as if in greeting or acknowledgement. The gesture is deliberate, almost polite, yet profoundly unnatural. When observed closely, the hand dissolves into smoke or mist, leaving an empty, fleeting void where solid flesh should be. The effect is startling, a tangible reminder that the figure exists between worlds, neither fully corporeal nor entirely absent. Some hikers report a tingling sensation or a sudden chill when this occurs, as if the smoke carries both presence and power. The rider's horse adds to the spectral impression. Its hooves make no sound on the rocky trails, and its movements are eerily fluid, gliding across uneven ground with a grace that defies nature. Witnesses often remark on the animal's eyes, glinting faintly in the dimming light, intelligent and knowing, yet devoid of warmth. The horse seems to respond to the rider's intent, appearing almost as an extension of the man himself, bound together in death as they were in life. Trails and clearings where the rider is seen are often left untouched. No hoofprints to mark his passing, further emphasizing the ghostly nature of the encounter. Encounters are fleeting. Travelers who attempt to approach the figure report that he seems to sense their movements. As they draw near, the rider and horse vanish, dissolving into shadows or fading into the twilight. The moment of disappearance is sudden and complete, leaving only the echo of a hoofbeat or a faint wisp of smoke carried on the wind. The experience leaves a lingering impression, a mixture of awe and dread, as if the mountains themselves have marked the observer as witness to something beyond comprehension. Locals tell stories passed down through generations, cautioning visitors about the trails at dusk. Many who venture into the Guadalupe Mountains in search of adventure or solitude have reported seeing the Black Rider from a distance, feeling the weight of his presence long before he comes into view. Some hikers speak of hearing the soft rustle of hooves or the whisper of the rider's cloak just beyond hearing, though the trail remains empty. Others recount sudden chills or goosebumps when entering canyons or clearings that are associated with sightings. Paranormal enthusiasts and researchers have occasionally attempted to capture evidence of the Black Rider. Cameras set up at dusk sometimes record fleeting shadows or dark blurs, while audio devices occasionally pick up faint noises, like the subtle rustle of a cloak or the soft rhythm of hooves on stone. Skeptics suggest tricks of light, imagination, or coincidence. But the consistency of accounts over decades has kept the legend alive. Each description emphasizes the same elements: the black horse, the hooded rider, the raised hand dissolving into smoke, and a sudden, silent disappearance. The legend of the Black Rider serves as a reminder of the mountain's history and the power of unresolved stories. He embodies the duality of the Old West of bravery and danger, the skill and the tragedy. While he does not appear to harm those who witness him, the presence is unsettling, a shadow of mortality and consequence lingering in the wilderness. His existence is a quiet caution. The past is never truly gone, and the land itself can hold memories of sorrow, vengeance, or unfulfilled purpose. Deep in the heart of the Magdalena Mountains, where the pinyon pines whisper secrets to the wind and the moon casts long, crooked shadows over the rocks, there stands a tree unlike any other. It rises from a steep ridge, gnarled and bent as if pulled from the earth by unseen hands. Its trunk twists upward like a clenched fist, bark cracked and blackened with age. Locals call it the bell tree. No one knows its species for certain. Some say it's juniper, others insist it's something older, something that doesn't belong to this world. But everyone agrees on one thing. When the wind blows through its branches, it rings like a bell. Not the clear, bright chime of church silver, but a low, mournful, toe-hollow, and lingering, like a sound carried from a great distance. On still nights, when the air hangs heavy and the stars burn cold above the peaks, you can hear it from miles away. A single note, rising and falling, pulsing through the canyons like a heartbeat. And if you're foolish enough to climb the trail after dark, you'll notice something stranger still. The louder the wind, the softer the sound. But at midnight, when the world holds its breath, the ringing grows stronger, louder, clearer, each toll echoing across the ridges as if summoned by something beneath the soil. The story begins in the 1880s, when silver fever gripped the Magdalenas. Prospectors flooded the canyons, hacking tunnels into the mountainside, dreaming of sudden wealth. Among them was a man named Elias Crenshaw, quiet man with sunken eyes and hands that never stopped trembling. He worked alone, high on the eastern slope, where the ore was thin and the rock brittle. For months, he found nothing. Then, one winter, he struck a vein so rich it nearly blinded him. Silver gleamed in the torchlight like frozen lightning. But the mountain took its toll. Men said Elias changed after that. He stopped speaking, stopped eating. He'd be seen at dawn, standing at the mouth of his tunnel, staring into the dark, as if something inside was calling his name. Then, one morning, the other miners found his cabin empty, his tools untouched. His journal opened on the table, the last entry scrawled in shaky ink. "It's not silver, it's bones, and they're singing." They found his body 3 days later, hanging from a twisted tree near the ridge. No struggle, just the wind tugging at his boots, and the tree creaking under his weight. The miners cut him down and buried him in the valley, but they left the rope behind, knotted around a low branch, like an offering. The villagers, uneasy, came up with a solution. They hung a bell from the same limb, hoping its sound would honor the dead, or perhaps scare away whatever lingered there. For a time, it worked. The bell rang with every gust, a steady, familiar tone. Travelers would pause on the trail, listening, and say a silent prayer for Elias. But within a year, the bell vanished stolen, they assumed, or perhaps swallowed by the mountain itself. No one ever found it. Yet the ringing didn't stop. In fact, it grew stronger. They claim the sound isn't made by wind at all, but by the breath of the mountain itself. Some say Elias never left, that his spirit fused with the tree, that his sorrow seeped into the roots and now sings through the branches. Others believe the bell was never metal, but a voice ancient and buried deep awakened the night Elias died. Hikers who've camped near the ridge speak of waking at midnight to the sound of slow, deliberate tolls. 1, 2, sometimes as many as 12, though no one can agree on the pattern. A few claim to have seen figures in the moonlight, shadowy shapes, standing among the pines, heads bowed as if in mourning. When they blink, the figures are gone. There's a superstition among locals. Each ring marks a soul lost to the mountain, a miner buried in a cave-in, a child who wandered off the trail in the snow, a lover who leaped from the cliffs in grief. The tree, they say, keeps count, and on quiet nights, when the ringing carries far beyond the peaks, it means someone, somewhere, has just taken their last breath. Scientists have tried to explain it. Some suggest the tree's hollow branches vibrate at a specific frequency, amplified by the shape of the canyon. Others point to mineral deposits in the soil that might conduct sound in strange ways, but no recording has ever captured the full depth of the tone. Microphones pick up wind, creaking wood, nothing more. The true sound, they say, must be heard in person, and even then, it changes. It knows you're there. A few years ago, a documentary crew hiked up with thermal cameras and audio sensors. They set up at dusk, confident they'd solve the mystery by dawn. But at exactly 11:58, their equipment failed. Batteries drained. Screens went black. The crew reported a sudden drop in temperature and a pressure in their ears, like the moment before a thunderclap. Then, at midnight, the ringing began not from the tree, they swore, but from inside their heads. They packed up and left before sunrise. The footage was never released. To this day, the trail to the Beltree is faint, overgrown. The village doesn't advertise it. Parents warn their children not to go near it, especially at night. But still, people come, the curious, the grieving, the desperate. Some bring flowers. Others leave notes tied to the branches with string. A few have tried to cut the tree down axis, bouncing off the bark as if it were iron. One man claimed the trunk bled black sap when he struck it. He left the mountain the next day and never spoke of it again. High in the Sacramento Mountains, where the aspens shiver even when there's no wind and the mist clings to the slopes like a morning veil. Travelers speak of a woman who walks without footsteps. She's pale as frost, draped in a tattered gray gown that flutters but never touches the ground. Her hair hangs in wild, colorless strands, veiling a face that few have seen and none remember clearly. They call her the Gray Woman, and those who crossed her path say she doesn't haunt the woods. She is the woods. The story begins in the late 1890s. In a small settlement nestled in the shadow of the range, a schoolteacher named Eleanor Voss arrived from the east, young and well-spoken, with a quiet grace that drew respect. She taught arithmetic and scripture in a one-room cabin, her voice soft but firm, her presence a calming force in a rough frontier town. For 2 years, she was beloved. Children adored her. Parents trusted her. Then, one winter, everything changed. A letter was found never sent, but discovered in her desk after she failed to appear for class. It was addressed to a married man, a prominent rancher in the valley. The words were intimate, desperate. Within days, the town turned. Whispers became shouts. Windows were broken. Her classroom was vandalized. The school board dismissed her without trial. Shunned and broken, Eleanor disappeared into the mountains. They found her journal months later, tucked beneath a stone near a frozen creek. The final entry read, "I did not mean to love him, but I did, and now, even the trees look away." Her body was never recovered. Some believed she fell into a crevasse. Others said she walked into the snow and let the cold take her. But the truth, as the locals now know, is far more unsettling. She never left. The first sighting came in 1903. A trapper reported seeing a woman standing among the pines at dusk, motionless, staring at his campfire. When he called out, she vanished. No footprints, no sound. Then, in 1917, a group of loggers claimed she appeared at the edge of their clearing, whispering names. Not theirs. Names of people long dead. One man swore she spoke his mother's name, the same mother buried 10 years prior. He left the mountains that night and never returned. Over the decades, The encounters multiplied. She appears most often in the high passes, just before twilight, always near the old trail that winds up from the valley. Travelers report a sudden chill, a silence so complete it feels unnatural. Then, out of the corner of the aja, flicker of gray, a shape between the trees. When they turn, she's gone. But the feeling remains. A pressure behind the ears, a breath against the neck. She doesn't speak to everyone, but when she does, it's a whisper, so close it feels like it's coming from inside the skull. Words that make no sense at first. The clock stopped at 4. She didn't scream. You left the door open. Survivors say the phrases haunt them for weeks, surfacing in dreams, until they realized some of them are true. Secrets they've buried, regrets they've refused to face. One of the most chilling accounts came in 1989 from a hunter named Roy Teller. He was tracking elk deep in the northern range when he first saw her, just a blur between the trees, about 20 yards off the trail. He thought it was a deer at first, the way she moved, slow, deliberate, weightless. But when he raised his binoculars, she was gone. He shrugged it off. But as the sun dipped behind the peaks, he began to feel watched. Every time he glanced over his shoulder, there she was, always at the edge of sight, never approaching, never retreating, just there. He changed direction. She remained. He stopped, fired a warning shot into the air. The forest absorbed the sound. Silence returned. And still, she lingered just beyond the trees. A gray smudge in the gathering dark. Roy set up camp, built a fire, tried to sleep, but he felt her presence like a weight on his chest. At one point, he swore he heard breathing right beside his ear. He jerked up, rifle in hand. Nothing. But the air smelled faintly of wet paper and old ink, like a forgotten book left in the rain. He didn't sleep that night. By dawn, exhausted and trembling, he packed his gear and started down the mountain. It was until he reached his truck and caught his reflection in the rearview mirror that he understood the cost. His hair, once dark with only a few streaks of gray, was now completely white. Not a strand remained. His face looked 10 years older. He drove straight to the hospital, where doctors found no physical cause. No stroke, no illness, just sudden, total depigmentation. The nurses called it a miracle. Roy called it a warning. Since then, sightings have grown more frequent. Hikers report her near the old schoolhouse ruins, standing in the doorway, staring into the empty room. Campers say she appears at the edge of their firelight, mouthing words they can't hear. Some claim she reaches out, fingers like dry twigs, just before vanishing. Others say she laughs a sound like wind through dead leaves. There is a theory among the elders of the nearby Mescalero community that she ice and teed just one spirit, but many that the gray woman absorbs the sorrow of those who die alone in the mountains, the lost, the heartbroken, the forgotten, that her gown is woven from their regrets, her voice a chorus of unspoken confessions, and that she appears not to harm, but to witness, to make sure someone sees you, even in your final moment of solitude. The Black Range stretches across southwestern New Mexico, its jagged peaks and dense forests forming a landscape both beautiful and treacherous. By day, hikers and hunters navigate its winding trails, drawn by the natural splendor of towering pines, whispering streams, and rocky ridges. Yet within this range lies a path unlike any other, a trail known to locals and travelers as the Endless Trail. It is a place where time and direction seem to unravel, and where those who enter are often confronted not just with the wilderness, but with the lingering presence of those lost to despair. The trail earned its name for a very peculiar reason. No matter how far a person walks, the end never seems to arrive. Hikers report setting out at sunrise, following the path through clearings and wooded slopes, only to find that hours later they are passing the same twisted, familiar trees they remember from the beginning. Rocks, streams, and moss-covered stumps repeat as if the forest itself is reshaping itself around the traveler. The sense of disorientation grows, an invisible pressure pressing at the mind, making each step feel heavier than the last. Legends surrounding the Endless Trail tell of countless souls who succumbed to hopelessness and ended their lives along its path. According to local lore, These individuals became trapped, forced to walk the trail for eternity, unable to find release. Witnesses claim to see ghostly figures ahead of them, shadows of men and women whose features are blurred, bodies slightly translucent. The figures seem alive in their movements, walking, pausing, sometimes turning to look over their shoulders. In some accounts, they beckon with a hand, inviting hikers forward, only to vanish the moment anyone attempts to approach. Hikers who encounter these apparitions often describe a sensation of being followed, though no one is behind them. The air grows colder, the silence more profound, and the forest seems to warp, trees twisting unnaturally, while shadows stretch longer than they should. Even experienced outdoorsmen report an uncanny feeling of déjà vu, the impression that they have passed the same location multiple times, though the trail ahead appears new and untouched. The repetition of landmarks, fallen branches, and gnarled trees creates a subtle panic, a creeping awareness that the forest itself is no longer just scenery, but a cage. Some travelers attempt to retrace their steps, hoping to escape the loop, yet the trail resists logic. Returning the way they came often leads back to the same section of the path they started from, the trees and underbrush mirroring themselves perfectly. Rocks that should have been passed appear again, streams curve in impossible ways, and even footprints vanish, leaving no evidence of travel. The forest is endless, and the hikers who enter the loop begin to question not only the trail, but their own perception of reality. The endless trail is not only disorienting, it is psychologically taxing. Many hikers report a growing sense of dread the further they proceed, a gnawing anxiety that intensifies with each repeated stretch. Some have heard whispers among the trees, voices faint but distinct, repeating phrases like, "Come this way," or "You belong here." Others claim to hear soft, mournful cries, the echoes of despair left behind by those trapped along the path. The combination of sound, visual anomalies, and repetition can overwhelm even the most rational mind, leaving travelers uncertain whether they are being haunted, lost, or simply imagining events under stress and fatigue. Encounters with the ghostly figures vary. Some hikers report seeing full-body apparitions, completely formed, walking slowly ahead. Others glimpse partial forms, shapes with faces blurred into shadow, or limbs barely defined, yet their presence is undeniable. These figures often move with a purpose, sometimes pausing to glance toward the trail, as if measuring the resolve of those who follow. When approached, the figures disappear instantly, leaving an empty clearing or a stretch of trail that appears normal. It is as if the spirits are testing travelers, or perhaps trying to draw them deeper into the loop. There are tales of hikers who, exhausted and frightened, turned back to escape the endless trail, only to find the same twisted trees repeating endlessly before them. Streams bend impossibly, rocks that were passed reappear, and the faint sound of footsteps echoes behind them even when no one is there. Some have described glimpses of shadowy figures watching from the tree line, vanishing when looked at directly. Others speak of the forest pressing closer, as if the trees themselves have taken on a malevolent intent, reshaping the landscape to trap those who enter. Locals warn against traveling the trail alone, especially after dusk. Even those who attempt the hike in daylight often experience the same uncanny repetition and encounters with shadowy figures. Stories passed down over generations emphasize respect for the forest and caution, suggesting that the endless trail is more than just a path. It is a corridor between the living and the lingering souls who cannot leave. Many hikers believe that the trail draws in those already burdened by despair, adding their own presence to the fold of the trapped. The Black Range, though stunning and rugged in its natural beauty, holds within it a trail that defies logic and reason. The endless trail is a place where time stretches, landmarks repeat, and the forest itself becomes a maze. Ghostly figures beckon travelers forward, only to vanish, leaving behind the echo of footsteps and whispers. Suicides along the path are said to wander endlessly, trapped in an eternal loop, and the living who enter feel the weight of those lost souls pressing against them. And so, dear listener, we leave the forests of New Mexico behind, or perhaps they linger with us still. Each grove, each canyon, each silent trail carries more than the weight of branches and stone. They hold sorrow, despair, and whispers of those who never left. When you next wander beneath the trees, listen closely. The forest remembers, and sometimes it speaks. Until we meet again, stay safe, stay curious, and never walk alone into the dark.